Chapter 2495. Wan Yi looked at the displeased Oris core stage cultivators around him and laughed. Tu Hong is a member of my discussion hall. This plan of luring the enemy into the finals was the result of the collective efforts of everyone in the discussion hall. How can it be credited to him alone? Luckily Qin Jian killed him. Otherwise, wouldn't the victory of our Dao sect be credited to him alone? I've already said that I have a clear conscience. I'm just stating facts, Qian Mo said in a low voice. What I want to say is that when we are organizing the disciples to kill the sword cultivators, we should also be grateful. If not for Tu Hong, of course, this plan of luring the enemy would be. At this moment, there was a wave of dermic power in the meeting hall. It came from the direction of Immortal Music Sect. Eh? Heng Zhao was slightly stunned. Looking at Li Qingshu's empty praying mat, he hesitated and pointed his hand. After the dermic power wave flickered violently, an angry young woman's face appeared. Heng Zhao and the rest were shocked. They hurriedly got up and bowed respectfully. Greetings to Fairy Hong Xia. You can wait. In the mirror was the head of Immortal Music Sect, Fairy Hong Xia, a middle-stage nascent soul cultivator. Fellow Taoist Li has already taken leave for a few days. Heng Zhao hurriedly explained. We don't know, I know. Fairy Hong Xia said coldly. Li Qingshu's natal spirit tablet is already broken. Ah? Heng Zhao could not believe it. Li. Fellow Taoist Li Qingshu's natal spirit tablet is really broken? If not, why would I inform all of you? Fairy Hong Xia chided. What are all of you waiting for? What are all of you doing? The war has been going on for more than 10 years, but I don't see any great contributions. Instead, it's the golden core cultivators who fall one after another. That Tu Hong was just assassinated in Sky Patrol City, and Li Qingshu is dead. Is old Shui still in Sky Patrol City? Yes. Heng Zhao's forehead was sweating. He could only lower his head and say yes. Hurry up and check the cause of Li Qingshu's death and report it to me as soon as possible. Fairy Hong Xia threw a tantrum and said coldly, I'll discuss with them. If it doesn't work, you can prepare to go to the battlefield. Yes, this disciple understands. Heng Zhao continued to bow. This disciple will immediately send someone to investigate. Humph! Fairy Hong Xia snorted and disappeared with a wave of her hand. After Fairy Luo Xiao left with a scolding, Heng Zhao wiped the sweat off his forehead and hurriedly called over the disciples on duty. He took out the discussion hall token and wanted to order them to investigate. However, Qian Mo raised his hand and said, Fellow Taoist Heng Zhao, it's a bit difficult for the disciples to investigate this matter. Why don't you let me go? I'll bring some disciples with me and they'll be able to send news back in time. Taoist Qian, Heng Zhao reminded him. Li Qingshu has been on leave for a few days, and there was no movement after he was killed. He must have left Sky Patrol City. If you go there now, it's still very dangerous. Li Qingshu was on duty in the conference hall. His death must have been caused by a sword cultivator. He sacrificed his life for our Dao sect. How can we not find the culprit? This old man is willing to take this risk. Qian Mo sighed. Good. Ping Dai from Su Yan faction clapped her hands and said, Fellow Taoist Qian Mo, it's still dangerous for you to go alone. How about this, I'll go with you. Great. Heng Yi smiled. Since that's the case, please take the medallion of my conference hall and bring 20 disciples on duty with you to investigate. Yes, Qian Mo took the token and cupped his hands in acknowledgement. However, just as he turned his head, he clapped his hands and took out a jade slip. He handed it to Heng Ming and said, Fellow Taoist Heng Ming, I only said half of what I wanted to say. This is what I thought and said when I was chatting with Tu Hong that day. It's the layout and deduction of this battle. I'm not talented and I know that I don't have the talent to command a battle. I can only carefully record it down for the discussion of the cultivators in the discussion hall. Oh? Heng Li raised his eyebrows and hesitated. However, He still sighed and took the jade slip with a wave of his hand. After reading it with his spiritual sense, he was stunned again and said in surprise, Tu Hong, this guy is indeed a great talent. Although we were at a disadvantage in the battle of the spirit veins, the attack on the spirit stone veins today was a feint. Not only did we attract the attention of the sword cultivators to the spirit stone veins, we even set up an ambush between the spirit stone veins to cut off the escape route of the sword cultivators. After speaking, Hingli glanced at everyone and said, Although Tu Hong is dead, he actually predicted the current situation. Even. Alright, I won't say any more. Just wait and see. If Tu Hong is here today, this battle, we will definitely win. Fellow Taoist Heng Ming is too much. Zhou Qingping from Thousand Leaf Ridge was unhappy. Do you mean that without Tu Hong in the discussion hall, this battle cannot continue? Haha, of course not. Hung Li handed the jade slip to the cultivator beside him and said with a smile, After all, the ones doing the work are the cultivators of the Tao sect. However, with this idea, we are confident that we can save tens of thousands of disciples from dying. After speaking, everyone looked at the jade slip one by one. Everyone had different expressions. Some were shocked, some were deep in thought, and there were even some who were disdainful. Alright, this is Tu Hong's idea. It is also my idea. Seeing that the jade slip returned to Heng Li's hands, Qian Mu cupped his hands and said, I hope it will be useful for the battle of the Tao sect. After speaking, Qian Mu cupped his hands and was about to leave. However, after floating a few feet, he stopped again with a hesitant expression. Eh? Fellow Taoist Qian, is there something else? Heng Li asked curiously. Sigh. Qian Mo looked around and looked at the golden core cultivators who looked at the jade slip with a complicated expression. However, this complicated expression only lasted for a moment. Qian Mo transmitted his voice again. Fellow Taoist Heng Ming, actually, what I showed you earlier was only a portion of what Tu Hong said. Tu Hong had a plan which I find extremely inconceivable. However, if you think about it carefully, it does make some sense. However, even if I use up all my brain juice, I still can't think of anything. This is perhaps the difference between a mediocre person and a great person. Fellow Taoist Qian, what do you mean? Heng Li admired Tu Hong's plan. However, when Qian Mo said something like this, he was even more shocked. Why can't you say it in person? Hee hee. Qian Mo glanced at everyone and said, Didn't you see their expressions? Just this plan alone makes them unhappy. If I take out the last portion, won't they turn the sky upside down? If that's the case, I might as well not take it out. In addition, even if I take it out, I definitely can't discuss it in front of all the cultivators in the conference hall. This is because I don't trust some of them. This? Hung Li hesitated and looked at the jade slip in his hand. He really wanted to see what other plans Tu Hong had. Fellow Taoist Qian, the other golden core cultivators are still fine. However, the cultivators on duty in the 3 countries can't possibly not participate, right? Yes, other than the cultivators on duty, the others can't let them know a single word. Qian Mo's face flashed with a serious expression. As you wish. Hung Li took out the token and pointed his finger. A cluster of green light flew out from the token and shot into the sky like a fountain. Then, with a schwa sound, it fell and covered the first row of golden core cultivators who were sitting on the praying mats. What is this for? De Sun from the Taiching sect frowned and said in a low voice. All the fellow Taoists in the conference hall are one. All matters should be discussed together. When we came to the Sky Patrol City, Lord Sect Leader had already made it clear that this restriction should not be used unless it was absolutely necessary. Otherwise, it would cause a rift among the fellow Taoists in the conference hall. Fellow Taoist Qian, you can speak now. Hung Zhao ignored De Sun and said to Qian Mo. Then, he looked at the others and sighed. Fellow Taoist Li Qingshu has left us without us knowing. Perhaps, this is the last resort. Oh? There's news about Li Qingshu? Xiong Hua Song asked curiously. Why didn't you say so just now? Could it be? Haha, fellow Taoist Xiong, you think too much. Qian Mo cupped his hands and said, "In a while, when the restriction is lifted, all of you can use the news about fellow Taoist Li Qingxiu as a perfunctory excuse. However, what I want to say now is Tu Hong's other plan that is absolutely inconceivable." As he spoke, Qian Mo clapped his hands and took out another jade slip. He handed it to Heng Ming and said, "Fellow Taoist Heng Ming, take a look." Heng Li could not wait any longer. He grabbed the jade slip and it fell into his hand. When he immersed his divine thought into it, the expression on his face was simply too wonderful. A kind of astonishment, puzzlement, and even a dumbfounded expression appeared on Heng Li's face. Everyone was baffled. They could not imagine what kind of arrangement Tu Hong had in this jade slip that could make a golden core cultivator so astonished. The time Heng Li spent looking at this jade slip was several times longer than the previous one. It was as if he was reading it word by word. This was extremely rare for a golden core cultivator who was used to using divine thought. Seeing how serious Heng Li was, De Sun and the rest unconsciously looked at Qian Mo's face. Although they did not say anything, weren't their eager gazes waiting for Qian Mo to explain? Cough, cough. Qian Mo coughed twice and smiled apologetically. Logically speaking, this Qian should be the clearest about this matter. However, this battle plan, I copied it from Tu Hong. It's better if I don't say it. Fellow Taoists, please take a look and you will understand. He. Wan Yi saw that he could not see the jade slip for the time being and said with a fake smile, "Since this jade slip records the battle plan of the Great Battle of Daolin's Sword, why did fellow Taoists need to borrow Tu Hong's hand? Wouldn't it be better to just say what you came up with?" -8. Chapter 2496. Who knew that Qian Mo was so serious, as if he did not hear the sarcasm in Wan Ye's tone. He said, "I just said that my heart can be seen by the heavens. My heart is so magnanimous that it can be seen by the sun and moon. This merit belongs to Tu Hong, so it belongs to Tu Hong. Just because Tu Hong was assassinated by Qin Jian's mistake will not taint Tu Hong's merit." Wan Yi still sneered and did not say much. The people around him looked at Qian Mo thoughtfully. After Heng Yu finished reading, he passed the jade slip to De Sun. De Sun waved his hand and said, "Fellow Taoist Heng Ming, just tell us what is written in this jade slip. I don't know how long it will take for us to finish reading it." "And I understand." Heng Yu thought for a while and passed the jade slip to De Sun. He said, "Everyone take a look. This is the credit of Qian Mo and Tu Hong. Seeing is believing. Also, while you're checking, I'll explain the details to you." "All right," De Sun nodded and took the jade slip. He used his spiritual will to read it. Indeed, when he saw the contents, his face turned strange. This time, the people who were rejected by Qian Mo were even more curious. "Ai, Tu Hong is indeed a hero of his generation." Heng Yu sighed and said simply, "He wants to set up a spirit hall array in the sword tomb. This spirit hall array is 10 times bigger than the one on Jinshan Quan. When our Dao sect cultivators push the sword cultivators of Huan country back to the sword tomb, we will lure them into the array and activate it, to kill hundreds of thousands of sword cultivators in one go." How is that possible?" Indeed, Heng Yu's words stunned everyone. They did not even consider the sword tomb, nor did they consider setting up a large array in the sword tomb. While Wan Yi was shocked, he said disdainfully, "Setting up a large array in the sword tomb is not considered a special strategy. In the previous battle, it was not used like this. There is no need to be so shocked. Fellow Taoist Wang." Heng Li looked him up and down and said indifferently, "To be honest, have you ever thought about this?" Wan Yi was startled. After pondering for a moment, he shook his head and said, "To tell you the truth, fellow Taoist Heng Ming, I really haven't thought about it. After all, the sword catacomb is behind the sword cultivators. Since the beginning of the war, we have been forced to stay in the country of Shi and the country of Lien. It is impossible to force the sword cultivators into the sword catacomb." "Why is it impossible?" Heng Zhao asked with interest. "That's the truth. Wan Yi spread out his hands and said, "Even though we are preparing to test the sword cultivator's strength for the final battle, but, fellow Taoist, what do you think are our chances of winning? Let's not talk about our chances of winning for now. Even Wan Yi, a golden core cultivator on duty at the conference hall, has not thought of the sword tomb. Then do you think sword cultivators will think of the sword tomb? Of course they won't think of it." Da Sun's eyes flashed with admiration. He hurriedly looked through the jade slip and handed it to Xiong Huasong and said, "The sword tomb is already far behind them. Moreover, they have occupied many spirit stone veins and have pushed the battle line into the 3 countries of our Tao sect. Why would they guard against the sword tomb? Catch them off guard?" Xiong Huasong asked as he looked through the jade slip. "Exactly," Hung Ming clapped and said. "In fellow Taoist Qian Mo's jade slip, Tu Hung's plan is like this. The sword tomb is extremely special. It is the passage that most sword cultivators need to use to travel from the country of Shi to the country of Shi and the country of Lian. Although other places can be passed through, they need to go around and it is extremely dangerous. Under the illusory sword, they need to pass through the sword tomb to attack our Tao sect. Therefore, all the battles are marked by the sword tomb. If we can force the sword cultivators into the sword tomb, our Tao sect will win. Who knows how many times the sword cultivators have passed through the sword tomb?" Wan Yi asked in a strange tone, "What is the use of setting up an ambush there?" "There are many uses." Hung Ming raised his voice and said, "Firstly, if we can set up an ambush in the sword tomb at the same time as the final battle, then it will be a 2-pronged attack. It can make the sword cultivators unable to take care of both sides. Secondly, even if we can't carry out the final battle and we can't figure out the strength of the sword cultivators, the sword catacombs ambush can still cut off the path of the sword cultivators so that they can't smoothly enter the territory of the 3 cultivation countries in large numbers. Thirdly, this is an ambush, a hidden hand. If it can be used, then it will be of great use. If it can't be used, then it won't be a waste. Actually, I still have some doubts." Da Sun finished reading the jade slip and said, "This great battle of Spirit Howl is indeed powerful, but the array is extremely unstable. The sword tomb is a place where the spiritual chi of heaven and earth is extremely rich in the gold attribute, so it is not suitable to set up this array. Moreover, we don't have the array diagram for this array. We have to ask the Shui region sage for it from the Sky Patrol City. Why is there a need to set up the Great Battle of Spirit Howl array?" Qian Mo said, "That Great Battle of Spirit Howl array requires a huge amount of spiritual chi of heaven and earth. The array is set up in Jinquan Mountain because it is supported by the spiritual stone mine. But what about the sword tomb? I'm afraid it won't work, right? With sufficient sword chi and enough gold attribute spiritual chi of heaven and earth, I'm afraid it will be even more effective for sword cultivators." "What does Taoist Qian mean?" Hung Ming knew that Qian Mo must have thought it through carefully, so he asked in a low voice. "I don't know how to set up arrays." Qian Mo smiled and said, "However, I don't lack people who are proficient in arrays in the conference hall. Let's listen to their opinions." After Qian Mo finished speaking, everyone looked at Xian Tian Sect's Xiong Huasong. Xian Tian Sect was known for their arrays, and Xiong Huasong was the golden core cultivator who was most proficient in arrays in the conference hall. Actually, when Taoist Hung Ming mentioned the Great Battle of Spirit Howl array, I was already thinking about it. Xiong Huasong didn't hide anything and said, "Only Tu Hong, that kind of crazy and ambitious person, would dare to use the lives of tens of thousands of cultivators as bait to activate the array. If we want to set up an array in the sword catacomb, we definitely can't use the Great Battle of Spirit Howl array. However, if we want to make use of the sword chi and the sword essence of Spirit Howl, the sword cultivator's sword array is the most suitable. Although the gold attribute spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the sword catacomb is abundant, I really can't think of a suitable array in such a short period of time." Xiong Huasong's tone was very pertinent, and everyone liked what he said. If he suddenly said a very useful array in such a short period of time, they might not believe him. After all, this was an era where arrays were lost. By the way, since Tu Hong can think of the array in the sword catacomb, will the sword cultivators also think of the sword array as Taoist Xiong said? The experienced and prudent De Sun asked again. We can't rule out this possibility. Hung Ming didn't care. However, as far as I know, the possibility is not high. After all, they have already crossed the sword catacomb, so it's meaningless to set up an array there. Hee, unless we push them back to the sword catacomb. Wan Yi smiled and said, however, looking at how they want to attack the Sky Patrol City, I'm afraid they won't think of it. A few years ago, I already asked the city guards of the Sky Patrol City to pay attention to the sword catacomb when they patrolled the area around it. Lu Xinwu of the Shanghua sect said with certainty. There are no traces of high-level sword cultivators there. Oh, Taoist Lu, you're really far-sighted when it comes to strategizing. Hung Ming was stunned and said, so you've already paid attention to the sword catacomb in the early years? Yes, back then, the sword cultivators didn't go too far from the sword catacomb. I was afraid that something might happen, so I made the Sky Patrol City check it out. Lu Xinwu smiled proudly and said, however, the sword catacomb is too dangerous, and there are too many sword cultivators along the way. The Sky Patrol City can't check it out often, so there's some news from time to time. It's nothing too important. That's great. Hung Ming clapped his hands and said, it seems that the sword cultivators have neglected the sword catacomb. This is really a good opportunity for us to plan. Li Jijia of the Chanbai sect said coldly, everything you said is just an armchair strategist. If we don't push the sword cultivators back to the vicinity of the sword catacomb, the array won't be effective. If we only block the sword cultivators from entering and exiting the sword catacomb, won't the array be destroyed if it's discovered by the sword cultivators? Taoist Li, how do you know that we can't push the sword cultivators back to the vicinity of the sword catacomb? Qian Mo said indifferently, even if we use the array to kill the sword cultivators in the sword catacomb, we can still kill many sword cultivators. We can also attack the sword cultivators' morale and boost our cultivators' morale. Indeed. Gao Wei, who had been silent all this time, said, doesn't Qin Jian often set up ambushes? Doesn't he often kill the cultivators of our Dao sect? Now we'll set up a huge ambush in the sword catacomb and slap the sword cultivators' faces. Everyone knew that Xunyan's school had suffered a lot because of Qin Jian and hated the sword cultivators' ambushes. Gao Wei's words were to wipe away the humiliation of the cultivators. I feel that this is a little rash. Cheng Ming of the Immortal Ascension sect said, in Tu Hong's plan, the most important thing is to speculate about the sword cultivators' dependence on the sword catacomb. But in fact, the sword catacomb is far less important than what the Jade Slip said. The sword cultivators entering and exiting the Hun country may not be completely through the sword catacomb. There are still many paths to choose from. If it's as Tu Hong thinks, we don't have to be so passive. We only need to set up a stronghold in front of the sword catacomb and move the Sky Patrol City to the sword catacomb. One man can hold back 10,000 men and kill every sword cultivator that comes. How can they invade the 3 cultivation countries? Why do we need to set up an array in the Sky Patrol City? Fellow Taoist Cheng's words are reasonable. However, this matter is a little urgent, and does not allow us to discuss it in detail. I think this plan is feasible. Hung Li raised his hand and said, who else agrees? Qian Mo raised his hand without hesitation. Hung Li wanted to remind him that the Imperial Thunder sect was not a sect on duty, but after thinking about it, he kept quiet. De Sun hesitated and raised his hand. Xiong Huasong also raised his hand. In the end, other than Li Jijia of the Chanbai sect, all the other Golden Core cultivators agreed. Even Cheng Ming agreed after a slight hesitation. -8. Chapter 2497. Fellow Cultivator Li. Hangju smiled and said, although Chanbai sect doesn't agree to set up the formation, you still have to obey the arrangement of the disciples. Humph, I understand. Li Jijia snorted and said, you don't send the useful disciples to fight against the sword cultivators, but learn from the treacherous Tu Hong. Can you be successful? Hangju ignored him and said to Xiong Huasong, "This? I'll leave it to fellow cultivator Xiong. What do you think?" "Good. After I've thought it through, I'll discuss it with all of you." Xiong Huasong did not decline and said, "Also." Qianmo was happy and said, "This should be kept a secret. There are many sword cultivator spies in Sky Patrol City. We can't rule out the possibility of some cultivators leaking information about our sect for some benefits. I think that other than all of you, even Sky Patrol City. Don't let them know about this." When he said the last sentence, Qianmo gritted his teeth fiercely. Yes, although he admired Tu Hong, but Tu Hong had also caused him a lot of trouble. When the palace master of Duile Palace heard the news outside Sky Patrol City, she did not get off the Thunder Boat and did not even meet Qianmo. Although she did not scold or reprimand Qianmo, how could Qianmo not know about Duige's anger? Fortunately, Qian Lei did not come to Sky Patrol City. Otherwise, Qianmo would not know what to do. The reason why he recommended Tu Hong's strategy was to explain his relationship with Tu Hong, to explain what he had done and how he had become a laughingstock. On the other hand, he wanted to make more contributions so that his future would not be clouded by the shadow of the previous incident. "That's right." De Sun narrowed his eyes and said, "Sky Patrol City is full of evil. Who knows how many sword cultivator spies there are? The city master's mansion has long been the focus of the sword cultivators. Who knows who could leak information to the sword cultivators? It's better to be careful. Actually, forget it, let's not talk about it." "Fellow cultivator De Sun, what's so hard to say?" Li Jijie said coldly. "Isn't it because you suspect that our arrangement was leaked to the sword cultivators? Otherwise, why would we lose again and again in this battle? Why are we always at a disadvantage? Fellow cultivator Li, be careful with your words." Hangju hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Sky Patrol City is part of our sect, they would never do such a thing. However, we can't guarantee that others will not do it. We'd better not inform them. Well, according to the dispatch of the conference hall's hall, it seems that the last batch of our sect's disciples will come to Sky Patrol City." Cheng Ming from the Immortal Ascension sect suggested, "Why don't we let them go to the Sword Tomb and let Dao Frenxiong train them in setting up the array?" "Sun I. De Sun's do des I, de Sun stts tu. We sun to sun sun sun. T des t. Sun ss. SSS to arrange s begin t. Yes, I understand." Xiong Huasong bowed and said. After everyone finished their discussion, they lifted the restriction again. Qianmo said, "That's all I know about Li Qingxiu. His death outside the Sky Patrol City is a threat to us. We'll have to wait for fellow Taoist Ping and I to investigate before we come to a conclusion." "Well, in that case, we'll have to trouble fellow cultivator Qian," Hangju said. Following which, Qianmo and Ping Dai left. The assembly hall was originally filled with whispers due to the activation of the restriction. However, at this moment, the entire assembly hall fell into a dead silence. Qianmo's parting words had truly touched their hearts. Yes, Tu Hong was dead. He was assassinated in the sky. In front of Shui Yu's, everyone felt that it was funny. A nascent soul realm cultivator's face was shredded. If it was in their own sect, this would never happen. But now, Li Qingxiu had been killed without anyone noticing. And it happened outside Sky Patrol City. Generally, Golden Core Realm cultivators in the conference hall would not leave the city. Why did Li Qingxiu leave the city? What was so important that he had to leave the city? Li Qingxiu was the same as Tu Hong, a middle Golden Core Realm cultivator. However, he was not of the same age as Tu Hong. Tu Hong was only at the middle Golden Core Realm, but Li Qingxiu was already at the late Golden Core Realm. Moreover, Li Qingxiu had a life-saving talisman given by Fairy Hong Xia. If one was not at the sword transformation realm, it would be impossible to kill him. Even if he met an illusory swordsman, if he was careful, escaping would not be a problem. However, Li Qingxiu was still killed. An inexplicable sadness filled the conference hall. This was something that had not happened since the beginning of the war. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Hung Ju's heart thumped. Earlier, everyone was still in high spirits, as if victory was within their grasp. Who would have thought that a single piece of news from Fairy Hong Xia would turn the atmosphere of the meeting hall into this? Even with Tu Hong's good plan, it would not work. Alas, we are just cultivators. We are not talented enough to command a war. Normally, people would think that since their cultivation was high, their aptitude would be high, and they would be able to command a war easily. It was just like how ordinary people would have more experience when they were older. However, it was a huge mistake to think this way. Experience was high, but it was not always right. These Golden Core Realm cultivators might have good aptitudes, but they could only be used for cultivation. As for commanding a war, it was really impossible. In fact, the reason why these Golden Core Realm cultivators were sent out first in every war was to see if there were any geniuses who could command the war. These geniuses? Of course, they had to be nurtured. Even if their cultivation could not be raised, they had to be nurtured within the sect so that they could be used in the Taoist Devil War in the future. In fact, in the previous war, there were many times when one or a few geniuses would appear and lead the sect to victory. How could it be the same as this time? Until now, there had not been a single Golden Core Realm cultivator who had displayed his talent. From the beginning to the end, it was a mess of command. There was no priority or long-term planning. The strategy of luring the enemy was also proposed by Tu Hong out of desperation. Although it was not a brilliant move, it could be taken as their own by these Golden Core Realm cultivators. As for why Shui Yuzhenren was so embarrassed and angry, it was because of his face. On the other hand, he had spent a lot of effort to nurture Tu Hong. He had taken a fancy to Tu Hong's fighting talent and thought that Tu Hong could help his Sky Patrol city gain a foothold in the Xiaoyu continent. Even if Tu Hong had some ulterior motives, even if Tu Hong had ruthlessly abandoned tens of thousands of Sky Patrol city disciples, he had endured it. However, the result of enduring it was that he was assassinated by Xiao Hua. How could Shui Yuzhenren not be furious? Fellow Taoists, Hung Ming said in a low voice. Although fellow Taoist Li Qingxiu has died, this was an accident. It was definitely not an ambush by sword cultivators, and it will definitely not affect the outcome of this battle. As long as we follow our previous plan and Tu Hong's current plan, we will attack in an orderly manner, and our Dao sect will definitely win this battle. Yes, fellow Taoist Heng Ming is right. Kunlun Sect's Yuan Zhongjue clapped his hands and said, Everything is ready except for the east wind. As long as we win this war, everything will be fine. Yes, we have a good idea. However, Fairy Hong Xiao's words have given us a reminder. Taiqing Sexta Sun frowned and said, Even if Li Qingxiu was not killed by sword cultivators, it must have been done by several illusory swordsmen. This time, we have gathered many Golden Core disciples in our sect and put in a lot of effort. If we don't go to the front line and only rely on those early-stage Golden Core disciples to fight, if they end up like Li Qingxiu, won't our efforts be in vain? Ha! Fellow Taoist Sun, you worry too much. Hung Ming clapped his hands and said with a smile, This is the last battle. We have killed all the swordsmen hiding in the Spirit Stone Vein and other places. Then, the illusory swordsmen under their command will definitely show up. In Tu Hong's jade slip. Oh, even if he doesn't have his jade slip, of course, we have to settle the karma. Of course, we have to meet the opponents we have fought for several years. Otherwise, it will be hard to explain when we return to the mountain in triumph, right? Yes, that's right. The group of Golden Core cultivators rubbed their palms together as if they were about to enter the battlefield. Also, fellow Taoist Heng Ming, we have to send out an order from the conference hall to inform the Sky Patrol City that they will also send out disciples and Golden Core cultivators to assist us in the battle. Lu Xinwu of the Shanghua sect reminded them. Fellow Taoist Lu, that's a good idea. Hung Ming nodded and said, I will send out a token to the Sky Patrol City now. When there is news from all the disciples, we will enter the battle. Hee, I think the sword cultivators will definitely not expect this. Lu Xinwu narrowed his eyes. We have sent out so many disciples, just to test the waters. After the test, the storm will come. That's right. Kill the sword cultivators with the force of a storm. Hung Ming's face was filled with excitement. Let's get ready immediately. Let all the disciples start moving. This is the chance to determine the outcome of the battle. Yes. All the golden core cultivators stood up and shouted in unison. The death of Li Qingshu alone had caused the Golden Dan cultivators in the meeting hall to feel a sense of crisis. However, the culprit had actually escaped into a pitch-black cave. He took out a piece of bright flower stone and placed it on top of the cave, illuminating the entire cave. The cave was about 100 feet in size and was rather dry. Xiaohua scanned it with his divine consciousness and was extremely satisfied. He took out a futon and threw it on the ground, then sat down cross-legged. With a wave of his hand, he took out Tu Hong's storage bag. After searching for a moment, he took out a jade slip. He did not have time to look at the other things and kept them in the storage bag. After looking at it for a moment, Xiaohua frowned. It seemed like there was a problem that was hard to solve. However, when he raised his head and looked at the cave, the corners of his mouth curled up and he revealed a cold smile. -8. Chapter 2498. Immediately after, Xiaohua grabbed Tu Hong's Mitsubishi magic treasure with his left hand and struck it with a spell. The magic treasure trembled slightly and emitted a buzzing sound. Immediately after, 3 rays of light shot out from the 3 sides of the magic treasure, as if Xiaohua's spell was wrong. Humph! Xiaohua snorted coldly. His right hand covered the magic treasure, and the universe and the sleeve technique firmly suppressed the magic treasure. The light on the Mitsubishi magic treasure overflowed and flickered abnormally, but it couldn't emit the slightest bit of light. Quick! Xiaohua's left hand continuously struck the magic treasure. Every time a spell struck the magic treasure, there would be the sound of a golden drum beating. Xiaohua actually used the Sunset Island's method of refining jade tablets to refine this magic treasure. When the Mitsubishi magic treasure completely calmed down, the 3-colored brilliance was as stable as congealed fat. Xiaohua bit the tip of his tongue and spat a mouthful of blood onto the magic treasure. Gugugugu. As soon as the blood entered the magic treasure, it immediately seeped in. The entire magic treasure seemed to be boiling, and the 3-colored brilliance alternated with each other. A golden dot suddenly appeared inside the magic treasure, and then gradually expanded until it submerged the entire Mitsubishi magic treasure. Strangely, the golden dot had just dyed the entire magic treasure when it immediately flashed again. After a few breaths of time, the golden dot disappeared, and the 3-colored brilliance began to alternate again. However, at this time, the 3 colors were so dazzling and vivid that they couldn't jump out of the magic treasure. Xiaohua let out a breath and flicked his hand. The magic treasure jumped into the air and slightly rotated. The entire cave was reflected in the 3-colored brilliance. Little Yellow, come out! Xiaohua's mind entered the space and called Little Yellow out. What's the matter, mother? Little Yellow cheerfully flew out. It first looked at the magic treasure in the air, then flew around a few times. It didn't find anything, so it asked curiously. Hee, you stay here. I'm afraid something delicious will appear in a while. Xiaohua smiled and instructed. Immediately, Xiaohua clapped his hand and took out the icy mirror. A few rather unfamiliar spells were cast on the icy mirror, but the mirror was also overflowing with brilliance, radiating in all directions. Xiaohua's expression was grave and stern. His hands continued to form spells. With the influx of magic power, the icy mirror began to vibrate. On the surface of the mirror, like ripples, the brilliance gradually rippled and a vortex slowly formed. The center of the whirlpool was a gray color that alternated between black and white. As the whirlpool gradually expanded, it sucked in all the light. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, all the light disappeared. The entire mirror also disappeared, leaving behind only a deep whirlpool. That whirlpool was dark gray in color, and it seemed like it was going to suck in all the light from the bright flower stones. Go! Xiaohua pointed his finger, and the Mitsubishi magic treasure in the air flashed with brilliance, and flew into the air above the whirlpool. Woo! A suction force was generated from the whirlpool and landed on the magic treasure. When the magic treasure's brilliance landed in the whirlpool, the magic treasure also slowly descended. Mitsubishi's magic treasure was originally rotating slowly, but as it fell, it gradually sped up. When the rotation was the same as the vortex's, Xiaohua shouted, "Go!" The spell that he had been preparing in his hand was struck, but a thunderclap was produced in midair. Xiaohua poured all the magic power in his body into the magic treasure. 1! A loud sound was heard. The magic treasure's brilliance suddenly converged and its whole body turned gray. The center of the mirror vortex was in contact with the magic treasure. With a kacha sound, the vortex wrapped the magic treasure and then began to condense. Ha! At this moment, a burst of wild laughter came from the bottom of the vortex. It was the laughter of Tu Hong's scheme succeeding. Immediately, a faint shadow rushed out of the vortex and rushed toward Mitsubishi's magic treasure. What? What's going on? When the faint shadow pounced on the magic treasure emitted a faint golden light and blocked the shadow outside. The shadow screamed in panic. Not only that, when Goldie saw the shadow, its eyes immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. With a sweep of its big tail, it flew in front of the shadow. With a humph sound, it spat out a silver light from its nose and firmly covered the shadow. Within the silver light, Tu Hong's faint figure appeared. It was the trace of his primordial spirit that was hidden in the icy mirror. "Fellow Taoists, spare my life! Spare my life!" Facing Goldie's silver light, Tu Hong panicked from the bottom of his heart and anxiously begged with a soft voice. "Humph! How can this young master spare your life?" Xiaohua sneered. "First, you planned to kill this young master, then you wanted to kill Dui Qiming's soul. Now you want to tamper with the magic treasure's refining method to seize this young master's body. With so many schemes, how can this young master spare you? This young master has his reasons." Hearing Xiaohua mention Dui Qiming, Tu Hong hurriedly shouted, "Yu Ming died for I can't ignore her life and death, you shut up!" Xiaohua sneered, "It's fine if you want to save Yu Ming. You should use the right path and walk the right path. This young master might be able to help you or even let you go. However, your heart is evil. You use saving Yu Ming as an excuse to do evil things. Yu Ming's life is a life, but Dui Qiming's life is not a life? How can this be? Good will be rewarded with good, and evil will be repaid with evil. It's not that there's no retribution, it's just that the time hasn't come. Now that you've met this young master, it's the right time to settle the karma. There's no point in saying more. Do you think I'm evil just because you say I'm evil? Do you think I'm good just because you say I'm good? What qualifications do you have to judge this old man?" Tu Hong shouted angrily. Although Tu Hong's voice was somewhat hysterical, it was still shrill and weak in Xiaohua's ears. "Ha ha, you're right. If this young master says you're evil, then you are evil." Xiaohua laughed and ordered Goldie, "Swallow him." "Yes, mother," Goldie agreed. A silver light flashed from its nose, and Tu Hong's primordial spirit was sucked into it and disappeared. Burp! Goldie burped and laughed. "Mother, if there's such a good thing, you must call me boy more often." "Hee, don't worry. There are many evil people in this world. It's enough for you to eat." Xiaohua laughed and kept Goldie into his space. At this time, the icy mirror had already swallowed Mitsubishi's artifact and returned to its original state. It was an oval mirror with tricolored runes faintly flowing on it. There were even golden threads mixed in. It was exactly the same as the Kunlun mirror that Xiaohua had seen before. "See this?" Xiaohua was obviously caught off guard. He took out Tu Hong's jade slip again in disbelief. After looking at it with his divine sense for a moment, he shook his head and said, "Apart from the refining method that Tu Hong changed, there are no other changes to this jade slip. Isn't this the icy mirror? How did it become the Kunlun mirror? Or maybe this thing is the Kunlun mirror?" Xiao Hua thought and waved his hand. The icy mirror fell into his hand. At this time, all of Xiao Hua's magic power was used to refine the icy mirror. There was only a small amount left. Xiao Hua urged his magic power and slightly shook the icy mirror. A green light flashed and several huge logs flashed out of the light, smashing into the stone wall opposite him. A hole several feet in size appeared in a flash. Ha ha, this is a true artifact. This young master just urged his magic power. Xiao Hua laughed heartily. Then, he swayed slightly and shot out a series of blue lights that froze the big hole in the ground. The last yellow brilliance was even more powerful. It directly penetrated the frozen big hole by several feet. The rich earth-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth was almost comparable to Xiao Hua's wishful staff. When Tu Hong took this artifact, he could only use the core of the Kunlun mirror. I couldn't see its power. A part of the Kunlun mirror was used as the icy mirror to transform into an illusion of ice and snow to protect Yu Meng's corpse. Now that the two parts are combined into one, others shouldn't be able to see any clues. Xiao Hua's hand caressed the Kunlun mirror very lovingly. He muttered in his heart. After all, he didn't have a suitable artifact now. When he fought with others, he would be at a disadvantage. After refining the Kunlun mirror, Xiao Hua opened his mouth and still wanted to fuse it into his body. Unfortunately, his body was of the Phoenix bloodline and had been tempered by the primal chaos chi. No artifact could be fused into his body like ordinary cultivators. Therefore, he could only send it into the Buddha fire. There were still many things in Tu Hong's storage bag. Xiao Hua only roughly looked at them before. However, he didn't have the mood to carefully look at them now. Not only did he not know the origin of these things, but Tu Hong's rumors had not stopped for a day. All of these things could be the source of Xiao Hua's exposure. He wouldn't be anxious to be fooled. Damn it, Li Qingxiu, you are a golden core cultivator of the discussion hall. How could there be few things in your storage bag? It's a pity that your self-destruction was too ruthless. Other than the incomplete jade strips, everything else turned into nothingness. And there was a golden alms bowl left behind. That pipa or whatever was left behind. Nothing was left behind. Xiao Hua recalled Li Qingxiu's self-destruction and felt pity in his heart. Fortunately, Marshal Kun's storage bag is still intact. Otherwise, this young master's efforts would have been in vain. Then, Xiao Hua took out Marshal Kun's storage bag. When he immersed his divine sense into it to take a look, he almost jumped up from the ground. How is this possible? This guy, there are materials in his storage bag that can repair the Grand Universe Shifting Token? Joy appeared on Xiao Hua's face. Almost without hesitation, he took out all the jade strips in Li Qingxiu's storage bag. When he hurriedly finished looking through them, he couldn't help but feel slightly disappointed. Damn it, these materials are indeed needed to repair the Grand Universe Shifting Token. However, the most important materials are missing. I'm afraid that this guy randomly collected them? Thinking about it, Xiao Hua's gaze landed on the other materials that were placed together with those materials. He seemed to be deep in thought. Thunder Roll Stone? Isn't this the material that Li Zongbao mentioned to refine some lightning pool? This guy actually has so many Thunder Roll Stones. Moreover, his jade strips even have the secret method to refine a lightning boat. This is the secret of my Imperial Thunder sect. How could he possibly bring these things to Sky Patrol City? Moreover, his storage bag only has the materials to refine the Grand Universe Shifting Token but doesn't have the secret method to refine or repair it. It's very obvious that he doesn't know how to refine the Grand Universe Shifting Token. Then why did he collect so many materials? -8. Chapter 2499. Other than Taoist Jingyu, I'm afraid I can't think of any other reason. Marshal Kun has a fire attribute physique, so he must be a weapon refiner in my Imperial Thunder sect. That Taoist Jingyu is also a weapon refiner, so the two of them might be related. Also, I've never met this Marshal Kun before, so why would he set up some 6-ding mountain ceiling magic formation here to plot against me? Also, he knows so much about me. If he didn't take orders from Taoist Jingyu, what other reason could there be? Right, how did this guy know that I have the strength of a golden core? I'm afraid it was Ming Mao or Dui Ling who revealed it. Alas, this woman, how could she keep a secret? Xiaohua sighed, but then he was shocked again. Also, Kun Fian. That's right, Kun Fian is a disciple of the Earth Thunder Palace. During my second Foundation establishment experience, she suddenly attacked and wanted to kill me. Looking at the situation, she seemed to have no choice. Although she was extremely unwilling to attack, she still had to attack. Could it be Marshal Kun? Forget it, Marshal Kun is already dead, and Kun Fian is also dead. Who knows if it's them? Xiaohua sneered. Looks like I was right to hide my cultivation. Just now, I saw from the jade slip that this Forbidden Law record is an extremely evil magic treasure. It requires 2 cultivators to enter this magic treasure at the same time, and it specifically tests the 2 people's magic power. As long as the magic power is strong, the other party will die in the strangulation of this Forbidden Law record. Unless the 2 people's magic power is extremely similar, then both of them can survive. Otherwise, only one person can come out from inside. Presumably, Marshal Kun found out from Ming Mao or Dui Ling that I have the strength of a golden core early stage and felt that he couldn't win with just magic power, so he set his sights on a competition of magic power. What a pity if we compare magic power, I can compare to a golden core late stage. How can you be my opponent? Alas, looks like no matter when, I can't expose my bottom line to others. No matter when, I have to keep a life-saving method. Hee, but this Marshal Kun is really cute. Xiaohua immediately revealed a smile. Usually it's the cultivators of other sects who send good things to me, but this time, it's my own sect's cultivators who send it to me. Oh, that's not right, Marshal Kun, this guy. His intentions were unforgivable. Why did he bring my thunder-controlling sect's thunderbolt refining method from the Sky Thunder Peak? I'm afraid he wants to make an exchange with Reverend Jingxi. Not to mention whether or not he wants to exchange the secret refining method of the Grand Universe Shifting Token. Even if it's anything else, he's harming the interests of my Imperial Thunder sect. Killing him was the right thing to do. Humph, it's all for nothing. As Xiaohua thought about it, he looked at the jade strip for refining the thunderbolt. And this thunderbolt is really something. It's not something that can be understood in a day or two. Moreover, repairing the thunderbolt is not something that can be done in a short period of time. There are only a few days left before the Battle of the 7 Extremes mountain range. Let's refine as many fire talismans as possible. Although Li Qingxiu's invisibility talisman and Xiaohua's fire talisman were both jade talismans, their advantages and disadvantages could be clearly seen. Xiaohua's jade talisman was not just a little bit inferior. The fire talisman's talisman was much worse than the invisibility talisman's talisman. However, from the performance of the fire talisman, it was indeed not bad. It could actually block the talisman of a nascent soul cultivator. Even if the opponent was a golden core cultivator, this large number of fire talismans could definitely make the opponent suffer. Therefore, Xiaohua still hoped to refine a few more. However, just as he put away the jade talisman, his gaze fell on a strange message talisman. This message talisman was somewhat similar to a flying sword. There was a faint flowing light on it. Oh? This seems to be a sword cultivator's flying sword message. Could it be? Marshal Kun is a sword cultivator? No, this is the Changbai sect's message talisman. Xiaohua thought for a moment and understood. This guy is colluding with Changbai sect's Reverend Jingxi. There must be that guy's message talisman in it. Humph, that old man Jingxi is a big enemy of mine. He killed Marshal Kun for me. Xiaohua scratched his chin and thought again. I don't know when Jingxi will come to Sky Patrol City. If I can condense my core, I will have some ability to protect myself. Thinking about this, Xiaohua took out the many jade slips that he had thrown into the storage bag and checked them one by one. Not long after, Xiaohua frowned slightly. When his divine sense came out of the jade slips in his hand, his brows relaxed and the corners of his mouth actually revealed a trace of a smile. Marshal Kuan, my brother, yours truly, Guan and I. Ha! This must be the message talisman sent to Marshal Kuan by the early golden core cultivator who robbed the Zhongling mountain village of qi refining materials. Xiao Hua's eyes turned rapidly. The two of them agreed on a place but didn't say a time. However, since Marshal Kuan left the city at this time, it should be soon. According to the jade slips, Huguan and I has the key materials to repair the grand universe shifting token. Marshal Kuan probably wants to exchange the refining method of the thunderbolt with him, right? Damn it, it seems that I must go. Not only can I kill that old man Jingxi's disciple, but I can also obtain the refining materials. It's really killing two birds with one stone. It's more than killing two birds with one stone. Huguan and I has always been ruthless. He even managed to get so many materials from a small Zhongling mountain village. How can there be few things in his storage bag? This young master's method isn't too vicious and merciless, right? Ruthless, I'm a ruthless and terrifying phoenix. Xiao Hua secretly snorted. He kept the jade slips and began to refine the fire talisman. When the time was almost up, Xiao Hua collected all the items and flew out of the cave. After identifying the direction, he flew towards the Seven Extremes mountain range. The Seven Extremes ridge was like 7 huge barriers, standing tall in the snowy highlands. The high foothills stretched across the sky, making people feel as if they had reached the end of the snowy highlands. Beyond the end, there was no wind, no snow, no cold. Yes, there was no paradise beyond the Seven Extremes ridge. It was still snowy and bone-piercing cold. However, there were spirit stone veins in the Seven Extremes ridge that cultivators coveted. Although the Seven Extremes ridge was a small-scale spirit stone mine, it had yet to be fully exploited. After the sword cultivators launched their attack that day, they were overjoyed. Not only did they send over a large number of sword-nurturing disciples to mine, they also asked the sword cultivator Failing Sword Manor and the blacksmith cultivator Bronze Bell Sect to send over more people to guard the place. In addition, the other sword sects also sent over disciples to support them. At this time, in the cave residence where the cultivators of Sky Patrol City were resting, Ruasi and Yun Bai of Failing Sword Manor, as well as more than 10 disciples from other sects, were sitting on jade chairs. The sword light on each person's body was faintly discernible, and the faint sound of the sword was incessant. It seemed that they were practicing some kind of sword array. As the sword light on everyone's body became more and more obscure, the sound of the sword also became more and more uniform. In the end, there was a clang, like the sound of a golden drum. A huge flying sword suddenly appeared in the middle of the crowd and rushed into the rock wall above the cave residence. With a loud boom, a black hole of several feet in size was blasted out by the huge sword. Ruasi, who was sitting on it, was a strong female cultivator of Grade 1 illusory sword. She had thick eyebrows and big eyes, quite masculine. She laughed and stood up, saying, "Sword friends, you've worked hard. Our sword array is so powerful with just a little cooperation. It's more than enough to protect this small spirit stone vein. When you go back to your respective sects, you still have to practice this sword array well." Senior Ruasi, a sword cultivator of Grade 6 illusory sword, stood up and said with a smile, "Senior, thank you for teaching us. This sword array is the secret of Failing Sword Manor. Now for the battle of our sword realm, Senior taught us without reservation. We have benefited a lot. Whether it's Failing Sword Manor, Lujian Sect, Failing Feather Sect, or Inyang Sword Sect, they are all members of our sword realm. The most important thing is to kill the Dao cultivators and control all the spirit stone veins in the hands of us sword cultivators." Ruasi waved her hand casually and said with a smile, "You just have to remember these words and practice the sword array well. As long as you kill more sword cultivators, I will be gratified." This sword formation was passed down long ago, when Senior seized this spirit stone mine while bathed in blood. Over the years, we disciples of various sects, and even disciples of different sects have diligently practiced it. We've long been familiar with it. Another sword cultivator of grade 5 illusory swords stood up and cupped his hands, saying, "It's just that our 7 Extremes Ridge has exceeded the vision of the Tao sect cultivators. I'm afraid they won't pay attention to this place. Otherwise, our flying swords will definitely kill more cultivators." Qingjianyo's words are wrong. The sword cultivator of grade 6 illusory sword shook his head and said, "It's not that our 7 Extremes Ridge is too far, and it's also not that our spirit stone vein is too small. It's just that our sword cultivators' warriors are too outstanding in this battle. They've beaten the cultivators to the point that they've retreated. They've gained the upper hand in every aspect. That bullshit meeting hall is badly battered and exhausted. They're simply unable to reach my 7 Extremes Ridge. What Yuan Jianyu said is right. It's all because this little brother knows too little." The sword cultivator of grade 5 illusory sword bowed humbly. Then, with a wave of his hand, a brilliant sword light flashed. "It's a pity that other than killing a few Foundation establishment cultivators 50 kilometers south of the 7 Extremes Ridge a few months ago, my flying sword hasn't seen any blood. Soon." A similarly tanned and skinny female cultivator of grade 1 illusory sword beside Ruosi chuckled and said, "You guys take turns every 10 days. We'll be able to send you out soon. You'll be able to kill cultivators easily. Thank you for your auspicious words, Senior Yunbai." The sword cultivator with the surname Chen bowed and said, "I hope that every sword cultivator on duty will be able to kill more." At this moment, without waiting for the sword cultivator with the surname Chen to finish his words, an intense sword light suddenly flashed from a corner far away in the cave. "Oh?" Everyone was slightly stunned and looked towards that corner. "Ha!" Yunbai laughed when she saw this. "Look, just now when we were talking about killing cultivators, there are cultivators passing by our 7 Extremes Ridge. Let's see who you're waiting for to go out and make a fortune." -8. Chapter 2500. With that, Yunbai waved her hand and a crimson sword energy fell into her hand. It was a small sword about an inch long. "Go!" Yunbai shouted. The small sword flew into the air and exploded with a ping sound, revealing a square sword shape. Inside the sword shape was a vast expanse of whiteness. After everyone looked at it for a moment, more than a dozen swordsmen of both sexes appeared from the white expanse. These flying swords were actually set up by sword cultivators. The situation from 100 miles away could be transmitted to this place through the other flying swords. "Oh? So it's another group of sword cultivators here to support?" Yunbai couldn't help but reveal a trace of bewilderment when she saw this. "That's over 10 swordsmen at the 6th grade of the sword. Why were they suddenly sent here? They might not be reinforcements." Ruosi shook her head. "Maybe they have another mission and are just passing by the 7 extreme mountains and are resting here." "Okay, I understand." Yunbai nodded and waved her hand. The square sword shape gradually closed and turned into a crimson flying sword that landed in a corner of the cave. Ruosi pointed with her hand and ordered, "Sword cultivator Chen, take a few disciples to greet them." "Yes, this disciple understands." Sword cultivator Chen bowed and flew out of the cave with a few 6th grade swordsmen. After a while, Swordsman Chen and the dozen or so bright swordsmen came into the cave. The first one was a swordsman with thick eyebrows and big eyes. He led everyone forward and bowed. "Junior Li Chun of the Void Heaven Sword School greets Senior Ruosi, Senior Yunbai, and the other sword friends." "Oh? So it's sword cultivators from the Void Heaven Sword School, please rise." Ruosi was slightly surprised to hear that these dozen swordsmen were actually disciples of the Void Heaven Sword School. The Void Heaven Sword School was in the limelight in this battle. Qin Jian's reputation was even more resounding than Lu Ruocheng's. If it wasn't for the Illusory Sword School's swordsmen, ordinary swordsmen would have thought that the Void Heaven Sword School was hosting this battle. Therefore, the disciples of the Void Heaven Sword School were very popular wherever they went. Moreover, wherever they went, that place would be the center of attention. "I wouldn't dare!" Li Chun was very respectful and stood up with a smile. May I know if all of you are just passing by, or do you plan to stay in the Seven Extremes Ridge for a long time? Yunbai asked with interest. Good lesson, Senior White Nose. We juniors are here on the orders of our masters. Li Chun clapped his hands, took out a sword slip, and respectfully handed it over. At this point in the war, our Sword Region's goal of occupying the Spirit Stone veins has already been seen through by the cultivators. They stubbornly defend their own Spirit Stone veins, and on the other hand, have begun to send cultivators to attack the Spirit Stone veins that we Sword cultivators occupy. The disciples who were stationed at the side have all been mobilized. Send reinforcements to the various Spirit Stone mines. Oh, I see. Ruasi took the sword slip and looked at it for a moment before nodding slightly. Since the Sword Friends of the Void Heaven Sword School have come to reinforce us, my Seven Extremes mountain range should be safe. Thank you for your auspicious words, Senior, Li Chun respectfully said. We are willing to follow Senior's orders and kill cultivators in the Seven Extremes mountain range. Good. Ruasi clapped her hands and looked at the 11 swordsmen behind Li Chun. Her gaze fell on a petite woman with delicate facial features, and she said with a smile, with Senior Marshal Brother Qin Jian's fame, if they hear that Senior Marshal Brother Qin Jian's martial niece is here, they will definitely be scared witless and won't dare to come. Ha ha ha, the swordsmen all laughed. Only the woman Ruasi was looking at had a slight frown on her face without a trace of a smile. Ruasi raised her eyebrows and looked at the woman with a smile. This sword friend, aren't you the illustrious Guyu? The woman was indeed Guyu. When she heard Ruasi call her name, she was puzzled. She stepped forward and bowed. Junior is indeed Guyu. Greetings, Senior Ruasi. Hee, invisible sword Guyu. Although your cultivation is at the 5th stage of the Bright Sword stage. Oh, you're already at the 6th stage of the Bright Sword stage? Congratulations, Ruasi said with a smile. I wouldn't dare. Junior's cultivation is still too far from Senior's. Guyu slightly frowned and hurriedly acted humble. Li Chun, who was beside her, smiled, but there was a trace of pity in her smile. Guyu, you don't need to be humble. Although your cultivation is only at the Bright Sword stage, your reputation is not inferior to Senior Marshal Brother Qin Jian's, Ruasi said with a smile. Since you joined the war, I don't know how many Dao sect cultivators you've killed. The number of people who died under your invisible sword is probably no less than Senior Marshal Brother Qin's subordinates, right? I wouldn't dare. How could Junior compare to Marshal Uncle Qin? Guyu replied without arrogance. Guyu, your future is limitless, Yunbai also said with a smile. I hope you can make a great contribution in the Seven Extremes Mountains and kill even more Dao sect cultivators. Junior's invisible sword has been lost. Now that I've come to the Seven Extremes Mountains with my senior martial brothers, I can only watch. I can no longer kill. Guyu raised her head and said very calmly, Ah? Your flying sword. Yunbai was stunned. Your invisible sword was lost? But... As she spoke, a buzzing sword hum resounded around Yunbai. The swordsmen nearby all involuntarily let out sword hum. Guyu's body was also trembling, and a faint sword hum could be heard from his body. However, Guyu's expression did not change as she smiled and said, Although this invisible sword is in Junior's body, but she is no longer Junior's. Oh? Why is that? Even Ruasi was stunned at this moment, as she asked curiously. Senior, please no! Li Chun hurriedly bowed and said, Junior Marshal's sister has comprehended something in the sword Dao. This is what she thought, and now it has truly integrated into her sword intent. Therefore, she can't fight. Oh, I see. Ruasi looked pensive as she looked at Guyu and then at Li Chun before nodding slightly. And, actually, Junior Marshal's sister is in seclusion, Li Chun added. However, since Marshal Uncle Qin has personally given the order, it's not good for us to decline. This time, Junior Marshal's sister is here and I'm afraid she can't contribute. Please forgive us. All right, Ruasi nodded slightly and casually agreed. However, she was an illusory swordsman. Just now, she only needed to probe a little to see Guyu's situation. How was she in seclusion? How was she fusing her sword? There must be some other reason. However, since the Void Heaven Sword School's disciple did not say anything, she would not pursue it. That's not right. Roissy nodded, but Yunbai said, in this sword's opinion, although Guyu has just entered the 6th grade of the Bright Sword School, her sword foundation is solid and she even has some comprehension. Can she? Hearing this, Li Chun frowned. He had already said it so clearly. Who knew that Yunbai would still pursue it? However, Yunbai was an illusory swordsman after all, so he could only awkwardly look at Guyu. Although Yunbai's name was Yunbai, her skin was absolutely not white. In fact, it was extremely dark, not to mention her appearance. Usually, when Roissy saw her, it was fine since they were all about the same. As for the other female swordsmen in the 7 Extremes mountain range, although they were beautiful and fair, their cultivation and reputation were low. At best, they were only at the 5th grade of the Bright Sword School. Moreover, they were all respectful to her. Although she was somewhat unhappy, she was also satisfied in her heart. Today, seeing Guyu, not to mention Guyu's snow-white skin, not to mention Guyu's pair of big eyes, not to mention Guyu's curvaceous figure, just Guyu's neither haughty nor humble, icy and intelligent temperament was enough to draw out a little bit of jealousy in her heart. Not to mention, the reputation of shapeless sword Guyu was very well known among cultivators. Even Li Zongbao knew of it, so how could Yunbai not know? A mere 6th grade bright swordsman was actually more famous than her, an illusory swordsman. This was naturally not something that Yunbai could tolerate. Therefore, when she saw Guyu explaining indifferently to Li Chun, Yunbai mercilessly asked. Guyu saw Li Chun's concerned and helpless gaze and only nodded slightly. She bowed towards Yunbai and Roissy and said, I won't hide it from the 2 seniors. Although this junior was in seclusion, I have already come out. First, I comprehended the sword intent and now, I have already communicated with the sword's spirit. As for why this junior is only here as a spectator, that is because this junior has already sworn that I will not take the initiative to kill a Dao sect cultivator, and will never use the invisible sword to kill any cultivator. Oh, why is that? Not only was Yunbai surprised, even Roissy was surprised. She blinked her eyes and looked at Guyu before looking at Li Chun. Cough, it's like this. Li Chun opened her mouth and said, My junior sister met the terrifying phoenix during an ambush. Ah, you actually met him? Yunbai almost cried out in surprise. You are actually still alive? Guyu smiled bitterly. Yes, this junior is not only alive, but living well. The terrifying phoenix is vicious and merciless. How could he let you go? Roissy looked at the surrounding swordsmen who also had some fear on their faces and said softly, That fellow not only killed Ling Yunwu and the other 12 swordsmen of the Soaring Wind Sword sect, he also killed Zhong Haoshuan and the other 6 swordsmen of the Bright Sword sect. Even Yu Ming of the Quilted Mountain sect was scared out of his wits. This junior did not expect him to be the terrifying phoenix at that time. A trace of fear flashed across Guyu's face as she said without hiding anything. At that time, he did not reveal his phoenix dharma body. Furthermore, this junior only thought that he had died in the spirit stone mine of the Quanjin Mountain. I simply did not expect him to be the terrifying phoenix. However, he did not seem to be as ruthless and bloodthirsty as what Senior and the others said. Guyu bit her lips and said softly, How is that possible? Yunbai sneered. This sword heard that this fellow looked like a Foundation establishment cultivator on the surface. However, he could even kill Ling Yunwu who was at the 3rd grade of the illusory sword. How could he be a Foundation establishment cultivator? At the very least, he should be a late-stage Golden Core cultivator. Even a late-stage Golden Core cultivator like him would not let go of sword nurturing and bright sword cultivators. He killed many of them in the Gale Snow field. How could he let such a fiend off? Yunbai's words made it seem like it was normal for Guyu to die. -8. Chapter 2501. Guyu squints her eyes and a trace of indiscernible expression flashed across her crescent-like eyes. She continues, "That day Junior used formless sword to plot against terrifying Phoenix. After being discovered by him, he used a magic artifact to chop Junior's right arm off." "Oh?" When everyone heard this, they looked at Guyu's undamaged right arm and were all shocked. Guyu sighs. "Junior was completely disheartened and knew that I had met my nemesis and was bound to fall. But just as Junior screamed and revealed myself, that guy actually gave Junior the formless sword and broken arm. He even took advantage of Junior being caught off guard and fed Junior an indescribable elixir into Junior's mouth. He terrifying Phoenix. Does he know you?" Yunbai laughs coldly. Guyu shakes her head. "Of course Junior doesn't know him. Even after escaping, I carefully thought about his appearance and the news from Gale Snowfield. Only then did I know that he was terrifying Phoenix. Then why did he let you go? Why did he give you an elixir? If not for his elixir, you might not be able to keep your right arm, right?" Yunbai asks. Guyu is silent, but her eyes are unyielding. Guyu, if your right arm is broken, even this sword will feel pity for you, not to mention a male cultivator like terrifying Phoenix." Yunbai bluntly calls out her name. "Junior was in a mess at that time and only thought of escaping. I didn't think much about it," Guyu replies. "But according to Junior's thinking, terrifying Phoenix might not have thought so. Then what did he think?" Even Roasi is somewhat curious and continues to ask. "I only feel that the horrifying Phoenix is not a cruel and merciless person. In fact, she is a kind person. If she was not forced into a desperate situation, she would definitely be merciful. She would not disregard human life." Guyu speaks frankly with assurance. "Even in the battle between Dao cultivators, he does not often kill people. What Senior said about those few situations, which one of them is not terrifying Phoenix fighting against my sword cultivator alone? When has Senior ever seen terrifying Phoenix working with others to kill my sword cultivator? This?" Yunbai is somewhat tongue-tied. "After Junior escaped with my life, I have thought deeply about it. The fault lies not with the terrifying Phoenix, nor with Ling Yunwu and the other seniors. The fault lies with the war between the Dao sect and the swordsmen." Guyu's big eyes flashed with extraordinary splendor as she said, "We swordsmen control the sword domain and are already free and unfettered, so why should we conspire against the cultivation three kingdoms? Even if we don't have spirit stones, we can still exchange things with the three kingdoms. There was no need to make such a big fuss and sacrifice the lives of thousands of swordsmen. If it wasn't for the sword Dao war, the horrifying Phoenix wouldn't exist, and Ling Yunwu and the others wouldn't have died." "Humph, what do you know?" Roasi sneered. "The great war of the sword Dao is far from something that a mere sword user like you can understand." "That's right, this Junior naturally doesn't know." Guyu sighed with emotion. "Junior only knows that the flying sword is based on Zhongzhong, with rather break than bend as sword intent, with a heart full of hot blood to cultivate the spirit sword in the heart. But now, in the war, you tried to cheat and deceive each other. You kill me, I kill you. The spirit sword in my heart has long been blinded by hatred. It has long lost its spirituality. What's the difference between this and the Dao sect's flying sword? Moreover, the formless sword in this Junior's hand requires a pure heart and a clear state of mind. Only then can it succeed. After this Junior participated in the Great War, I always schemed to kill cultivators. My heart has already fallen and dust has long accumulated in it. How can it still be traceless? How can it still be formless? I'm afraid that the horrifying Phoenix saw through this Junior's whereabouts because of this. After this Junior escaped, in addition to rejoicing, I gained enlightenment and found the true essence of the formless sword. This was how I broke through to the 6th grade of the bright sword in a short period of time." Seeing that Yunbai wanted to say something, Guyu didn't give her the chance to speak and continued, "Now, this Junior's formless sword is in my heart, and not in my hand. The formless sword in my body has been seen through by others and can no longer be used to kill people. This is your understanding?" Yunbai sneered. You were just let off by others and you're grateful to them? You no longer raise the flying sword in your hand? Then this sword can tell you that you're very wrong. This is only a small matter. For this small matter, you've forgotten the righteousness of the great war of Tao cultivators and the righteousness of my sword realm's survival. Even if your formless sword advances, you will never succeed and will never become an illusory sword. This is because you've forgotten that a sword is a sword. It is the weapon we swordsmen use to sacrifice ourselves, the weapon we use to take the lives of cultivators. As she spoke, Yunbai opened her mouth and a string of lotus flowers flew out. It streaked across the air and an extremely sharp sword she landed on Guyu's head. That sword she was unhindered and had already shaved off most of Guyu's black hair. Facing such a flying sword, can you stay true to your heart? Can you allow yourself to be slaughtered? Senior! Guyu was fearless and calmly said. Facing this threat, this junior naturally won't wait for death. However, this junior has already said that this junior's sword is in my heart and not in my hand. Ridiculous. I didn't expect the Void Heaven Sword School to have senior martial brother Qin Jian, who killed Tu Hong, to have someone like you. Yunbai was about to scold her again, but Ruosi waved her hand and stopped her. No need. Since little friend from the Void Heaven Sword School came to support us, they naturally don't have to fight. It's fine as long as they have the intention. Besides, my 7 Extremes mountain range has more than 30,000 swordsmen, so what if we lose one? Hearing Ruosi's decision, although Yunbai was unwilling, she could only shut her mouth. Even now, this female illusory sword school swordsman still didn't understand why she suddenly made things difficult for this beautiful swordsman who was only at the 6th grade. Hearing this, Li Chun let out a long sigh and helplessly looked at Guyu. He had heard Guyu say the same thing back then. He was even more surprised than Yunbai and the others. Although Guyu's words revealed a thorough understanding of sword essence, and Guyu really relied on this understanding to advance. However, this was a battle between Tao cultivators. Who cared about what kind of understanding you had? You only needed to contribute to the sword domain and kill as many cultivators as possible. Not only did you not kill cultivators, but you also pointed out the inappropriateness of the sword Tao battle. Wasn't this clearly against the sword domain? Fortunately, Qin Jian's reputation had always been extremely resounding, especially when it was said that Tu Hong was killed by Qin Jian. Although Qin Jian denied it in the sword domain, those who didn't know the truth still put this credit on Qin Jian's head. Although formless sword Guyu's reputation was resounding, there were many who were on the same level as her. She was far from being as arrogant as Yunbai said. Guyu's change had only happened recently. If she didn't say it herself, how could others know? Even if he knew, just like Ruosi, he would still give in because of Qin Jian. Many thanks, Senior Ruosi. Guyu bowed very graciously. Seeing Guyu being so obedient, Yunbai couldn't help but feel awkward. Inside the cave, the other drawing sword swordsmen were also a little surprised. They unconsciously looked at each other, not only because of Guyu's words, but also because of Yunbai's actions. At this moment, a buzzing sound came from the place where the message was sent. A sword light suddenly flew out. Could it be that there are other sword friends coming to support? Ruosi obviously wanted to change the topic. She smiled and pointed with her finger. The sword light flew into the air. Just as the scarlet brilliance was about to explode, a few more buzzing sounds were heard. Not good. Ruosi's expression changed. She grabbed with one hand, and several scarlet brilliants flew into the air. Open! He heard Ruosi's soft reprimand, and several sword lights completely exploded. Several square mirrors were scattered in the air of the cave residence. See? So many cultivators? When Ruosi saw the dense crowd of cultivators flying over from afar, covering the sky and covering the earth, there were even more than 10 huge flying magic tools. Ruosi's eyes narrowed, and his heart was filled with horror. Sister. Yunbai was even more puzzled. When was my 7 Extremes Ridge valued so highly? Looking at the incoming cultivators, there should be more than 10,000, right? More than that. Roasi bit her lips and said coldly, to be able to activate 7 messenger flying swords, how could there be less than 20,000? These cultivators seem to be Huanhua sect disciples? Li Chun was a little hesitant, as if he couldn't make up his mind. That's right, they are Huanhua sect disciples. Yunbai sneered. Among the Dao sect cultivators, only Shi country's Huanhua sect likes to show off. They have flying artifacts wherever they go. Even when they go out to attack, they dress up as if they are getting married. Haha. The group of swordsmen who drew their swords couldn't help but cover their mouths and laugh. Li Chun also laughed involuntarily. It seemed that this was the first time he heard such a description of Huanhua sect disciples, and he vaguely understood Yunbai's previous reproach to Gu Yu. Just as everyone was carefully inspecting, dozens of lights shot out from the Huanhua sect disciples. It was the late-stage Foundation establishment disciples who were scouting ahead. The swordsmen only felt a violent tremor in front of their eyes. The mirrors suddenly turned black, and all the images disappeared. Then, with a few crisp sounds, the mirror cracked inch by inch, turning into specks of fluorescent light that fell into the air. Obviously, the Huanhua sect disciples discovered the messenger flying swords and destroyed them. Huanhua sect actually launched a large-scale attack. This is really not good. Ruosi looked at the shattered fireflies in the air. Although her tone was very grim, the expression on her face didn't change much. Humph. These Dao sect bastards are really tired of living. Yunbai sneered. They want to attack my 7 Extremes Ridge with just 20,000 disciples? Let's not talk about anything else. On that day, my sword cultivator invested nearly 40,000 disciples in Golden Spring Mountain. Seniors, please understand. Right now, Huanhua sect is already 300 li away. Should we meet the enemy now? Li Chun bowed and said, we Void Heaven Sword School disciples are willing to be the first line of defense. Haha. It's fine for now. Yunbai laughed. It's just 20,000 disciples. This sword won't let them return. 1-1. Another wave of sword humming sound was heard. It came from the place where the message was sent, and a sword light suddenly flew out again. -8. Chapter 2502. Not good! At this time, Ruosi was really a little shocked. However, before she could reach out her hand, there was a series of strong roars, and several scarlet lights rushed into the sky. Ruosi did not dare to be negligent. She hurriedly grabbed with her hand, and those scarlet sword lights also exploded, and several images of 4 directions appeared again. However, after a series of explosions, the sword lights that had just appeared on the surface of the mirror were immediately shattered into fluorescent light. These flying swords were actually discovered by the cultivators first, and before the sword cultivators could see any clues, they were immediately destroyed. Which sect is this? Ruosi was shocked. Fortunately, after the sword lights were annihilated, the last small mirror surface that was only 1 foot square appeared. It seemed to be from the distant horizon, with the same imposing manner as the Huanhua sect's disciples. The tens of thousands of Imperial Thunder sect's disciples also urged their magic tools to fly over. Terrifying Phoenix! When Ruosi saw the Imperial Thunder sect's disciples' attire, what Gu Yu said just now unconsciously appeared in her mind. She then looked at the other drawing sword sect's disciples, and a trace of panic could not help but flash across their faces. This Gu Yu really came at the wrong time. Ruosi could not help but sigh, but she still looked at Yunbai with some reproach. If Yunbai did not force her, Gu Yu would not have said such demoralizing words, right? Gu Yu seemed to have sensed everyone's fear. She hesitated and whispered, Junior doesn't think that terrifying Phoenix would be here. He has a proud personality, and will definitely not attack together with other cultivators. That's right. Yunbai also came to a realization. She hurriedly patted the jade chair and shouted, Think about that terrifying Phoenix's origin. How could he be interested in our 7 Extremes mountain range? Yunbai also tried her best to redeem her mistake just now. That's right, that's right. The group of drawing sword sect swordsmen's eyes lit up, and they also came to a realization. They had never heard of an expert like terrifying Phoenix appearing together with other cultivators. Pa! With an explosive sound, a thumb-sized lightning flashed on the mirror surface, and the mirror surface finally exploded. Senior sister! Yunbai stood up and said, "This Imperial Thunder Sect's group of cultivators seems to have 10 to 20,000. This adds up to nearly 40,000 cultivators. It's the same as our 7 Extremes Mountain Ranges swordsmen. Looks like the Dao sect has done their homework well." "Yes." Roasi nodded slightly. She waved her hand and said, "Junior Sister Yunbai, now that the Imperial Thunder Sect and the Cleansing Flower Sect are attacking, you and I will definitely have to face the enemy separately. Which sect's cultivators will you kill?" "Washing Flower Sect," Yunbai cried out without any hesitation. "Very good." Roasi stood up as well. She clapped her hands and a similarly crimson flying sword appeared. With a wave of her hand, the flying sword rushed into the air. With a series of sword cries, it turned into several flying swords and rushed out of the cave. "This sword has already informed the disciples who are guarding 100 miles away to retreat. For the time being, we will not go and face them head-on. Wait for my reinforcements to arrive, then we will fight them to the death." "Chen Feng!" The swordsman surnamed Chen hurriedly stood up. "Senior, please give me your orders. Go and inform sword friend Ji of the Bronze Bell Sect. Tell him in detail what happened here. Ask him to come out of seclusion immediately and assume command." Chen Feng bowed hastily and left hastily. "Yes, this junior understands." "Oh? Senior Ji of the Bronze Bell Sect is here as well?" Hearing this, Li Chun's face was obviously filled with joy. Roasi nodded slightly and said with a smile, "He is the swordsman with the highest cultivation in our 7 Extremes Ridge. This sword and junior sister Yunbai are merely watching over the house for him." "Very good." Li Chun beamed and said, "Since Senior Ji is here, those several tens of thousands of Dao sect cultivators are nothing to be afraid of." Yunbai nodded. "Hee, exactly." Li Chun asked, "Senior, please give your orders. Which senior shall we follow to fight the enemy?" Roasi did not even need to think. She waved her hand and said, "All of you follow this sword to kill the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect." "Yes." Gu Yu and the rest also stood up and answered with a bow. Then, Roasi methodically divided the group of swordsmen into 2 groups, and each of them went out with their own men. The Imperial Thunder Sect did not come to the 7 Extremes Ridge alone. Together with the Imperial Thunder Sect, there were also disciples from the Mozong Mountain and Yongyi Sect. There were even disciples from a few small sects in the country of Shi. However, the Imperial Thunder Sect only sent out an early Gold Core stage cultivator. Moreover, the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples made up the majority. At this moment, the group flying in front was a group of disciples from the Canlei Palace. The leader was a late Foundation Establishment stage cultivator. In his hand, he held a strange-looking magic treasure. The 2 ends were sharp, but the middle was flat. There was some flickering brilliance within it. This cultivator activated the magic treasure in his hand. The brilliance within the magic treasure flickered repeatedly. Suddenly, a slanted corner above the flat surface shook violently. That disciple did not hesitate and activated his magic power. The magic treasure shook a few times, and a few thumb-sized lightning bolts shot out toward the wilderness in the distance. A rumbling sound was heard. It really hit the extremely thick layer of snow in the wilderness. After a moment, when there was no more movement, that disciple continued to activate the magic treasure. At this moment, the flat surface in the middle of the magic treasure returned to its original tranquility. It was like a layer of water, and there were no ripples at all. "All of you wait here!" That disciple ordered and returned with the magic treasure in his hand. The Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples were arranged in a neat formation. Basically, each Thunder Palace was a large group. Within each large group, there were several dozens of small groups. On the 2 sides of the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples were Mozong Mountain and Yongyi Sect's disciples. They were all waiting in formation according to the customs of the 2 sects. The other scattered sects were sandwiched between the 3 sects' disciples. Although there were few people, their morale was high, and they were all valiant and high-spirited. Above the heads of these disciples, there were another dozen or so peak late Foundation establishment cultivators clustered around an early Goldcore old man. These dozen or so people were also flying at a leisurely pace, not in a hurry at all. The leading late Foundation establishment stage disciple flew into the air and bowed. Reporting to Marshal Uncle Ken, this disciple has already used the clear and turbid technique to check the surrounding 30 miles. There are no more traces of flying swords or sword formations. The Goldcore stage cultivator was naturally the leader of the Imperial Thunder sect. He was also the commander of the attack on the 7 Extremes Ridge, Kenshing from the Canlay Palace. After listening to the report of the Foundation establishment stage disciple, Kenshing nodded slightly. And good. Then, he released his divine sense and sneered. The flying swords and sword formations within 30 miles are gone. However, there are still many swordsmen lying in ambush outside 30 miles. These swordsmen are probably preparing to launch a sneak attack on us. Go Yufeng, send 300 disciples and bring me the heads of these swordsmen. Yes, this disciple understands. The eyes of the Imperial Thunder sect's disciple called Yufeng flashed with a trace of excitement. His figure flew down quickly and pointed in the air for a moment. Another 300 Imperial Thunder sect's disciples followed him and flew forward. Senior Ken is really amazing. The Imperial Thunder sect's disciples had just been sent out. A somewhat gray-haired but still charming late Foundation establishment stage female cultivator said with a smile. The divine sense of an ordinary Goldcore stage senior can only reach 10 miles. At most, it's 20 miles. I didn't expect that senior's divine sense has actually reached 30 miles. If senior is pregnant, wouldn't it directly exceed 1,000 miles? Kenshing's face flashed with a trace of pride. However, he still waved his hand and said, Fellow Taoist Jing overestimates this old man. This old man only had some fortuitous encounters when I was young. My divine sense is quite long and has some advantages compared to ordinary fellow Taoists. However, divine sense of 1,000 miles is the magical ability of a function separation stage senior. Even if this old man is a nascent soul stage, it's impossible for me to do that. Senior Ken is too humble. Another female cultivator spoke. This female cultivator looked slightly younger than Mozong Mountain's Jingtingding. Her hair was very black. She was Lingzhu from the Oni sect. Senior has a high starting point and your future achievements will be even higher. If not for Senior's profound cultivation, how could you be sent here? The 7 Extremes Ridge is the original spirit stone mine of Century City. They didn't let their disciples come and instead let Senior lead the team. Isn't it because they are afraid that they can't take down the 7 Extremes Ridge? Kenshing was about to say something when he suddenly raised his head again and frowned. It seemed that his divine sense had detected something. Lingzhu, Jingtingding and other late Foundation establishment stage cultivators all released their divine senses. Unfortunately, their divine senses were only 10 miles. How could they see anything? Forget it. Seeing that everyone was looking at him eagerly, Kenshing sneered and said, The sword cultivator actually issued a summoning order for the ambushing sword cultivators to return to the 7 Extremes Ridge. I'm afraid that Dui Yufeng and the rest will return empty-handed. Haha, sword cultivators also have dog noses. A late Foundation establishment stage cultivator said with a smile. They know that we came prepared today and saw Senior Ken's power. They were so scared that they wet their pants. Kenshing knew that this was an act of flattery, but he still felt good when he heard it. He looked at the leader of the small sect and nodded slightly. Sure enough, after a long while, Dui Yufeng returned with the 300 disciples. He reported in a very dejected manner. Marshal Uncle Ken, this disciple is unworthy. Before we could even get close, we saw the appearance of a messenger flying sword. Those sword cultivators didn't even look at us before they all flew away. It's okay, Kenshing said with a smile. No matter how they hide, it's only a distance of 200 miles. In the end, they will meet us. You lead these 300 disciples and lead the way. Keep a distance of 10 miles from the main group. If you encounter any sword cultivators, kill them immediately. Roger. Yufeng shouted loudly and whistled in midair. Then, his figure made a beautiful turn and flew forward. Haha, this child. He really has no respect for his elders, Kenshin said with a smile. Isn't this because Senior Ken is amiable and approachable? Lingzhu said with a smile. If you had a straight face and looked like you didn't want strangers to come close, not to mention Senior Brother Dui, we would also feel like we were sitting on pins and needles. Ha ha ha, Kenshin laughed and waved his hand. This is my nature. I don't like to put on airs as an elder. Even if I did, I would feel uncomfortable. Ha ha, then it's our fortune, Jingtingting replied with a smile. -8. Chapter 2503. Don't worry. I'm not a greedy person either. As long as we find out the strength of the 7 Extremes mountain range, of course, the final goal is to take down the 7 Extremes mountain range. All of you have contributed greatly, and this old man will not take even half of the battle credits. Kenshin smiled and said, We're under Senior Ken's lead, so the credit will naturally go to Senior. Everyone's face was filled with joy as they bowed and answered. Wait for me. Kenshin was very satisfied. He looked at the horizon and asked, How's the situation with the Huanhua sect? I'll let Senior know. Lingzhu hurriedly replied. An hour ago, they sent a message. Just like us, they're only near the edge of the 7 Extremes mountain range and haven't encountered any sword cultivators. I'll send a message over as well. Tell them about this place, Kenshin instructed. Also, order the disciples to increase their speed by 10% and prepare for battle. Yes, we understand. Everyone's face turned cold. They knew that their previous ease had come to an end. As the distance increased, the battle was inevitable. When the group of Foundation Establishment late-stage cultivators returned to their group, only a few Imperial Thunder Sect disciples were left beside Kenshin. The entire group of cultivators indeed increased their speed. Kenshin squinted his eyes and stood with his hands behind his back. His face was filled with confidence as his gaze fell on the mountain range that looked like a screen. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A continuous sword cry that could even shake the earth and mountains was emitted from the 7 Extremes mountain range. Immediately after, a hurricane swept out and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered and poured into the 7 Extremes ridge. As the spiritual energy of heaven and earth poured into the 7 Extremes ridge, the hurricane became even bigger. Immediately, countless moo sounds were heard in the air and shook the surroundings. A hurricane blew across the vast sky and the robes of the 20,000 Dao sect cultivators were blown up. The accumulated snow on the snow region plateau was also swept up into the air. In the blink of an eye, a huge shadow suddenly appeared on the towering mountain range in the distance. Similarly, 20,000 swordsmen flew into the air from the 7 Extremes ridge in an orderly formation. The black mass of swordsmen blocked the setting sun and covered half of the sky. In addition to the intense flickering of the sword light, that oppressive aura was able to cause the sweat of the cultivators to stand even though they were dozens of miles away. They're just a group of people who want to show off. Kenshin was shocked, but he still sneered disdainfully. Call Yufeng turn, Kenshin instructed. Slow down and arrange the formation. I want to see if the treasures of my Imperial Thunder Sect or the flying swords of the sword cultivators are more powerful. Yes, the disciple beside him hurriedly sent out a message talisman upon receiving the order. Dui Yufeng and the others were originally hesitant, but at this moment, they received the order and returned. Charge, Kenshin waved his hand slightly, and urged his transcendence energy to shout. When Kenshin's order fell into the ears of the 20,000 cultivators, it was like thunder. Everyone urged their transcendence energy at the same time. The magic tools and treasures in their hands were all taken out. Similarly, there were 10,000 flashes of lightning. Streams of heaven and earth's spiritual chi gathered and similarly formed a hurricane. Especially the rolling thunder and flickering lightning. The momentum was so great that it was not inferior to the sword cultivators' sword formation. The group of cultivators and swordsmen were all on alert. Each of them urged their bodies. Seeing that the two sides were getting closer and closer, they could clearly see the two sides. When they heard the sword cultivators' orders, the 100 or so swordsmen who were riding on their flying swords at the very front urged their sword energy. The 100 or so sword flashes rushed out of the crowd and formed a huge flying sword in the sky. The sword flashes swayed as they rushed towards the cultivators. The cultivators' treasures could not be compared to the swordsmen's flying swords. They could not reach far. When they saw the flying swords attacking, the 100 or so cultivators also exerted their power at the same time. They shouted in unison and the magic tools in the sky flashed as they rushed out. Boom! A huge sound rang out. The flying swords collided with the group of magic tools. A series of explosions rang out, and the air waves rushed into the sky. The accumulated snow on the nearby snow region was blown away. At this time, the vegetation and gravel were also blown into the air. Not only that, the entire ground shook slightly from the impact of the air waves. His sword cultivators indeed have some skills! The 100 or so flying swords rushed into the magic tools and collided with each other. Most of the flying swords were blocked by the magic tools. However, there were still about 10% of the flying swords that broke through the magic tools' defense and approached the cultivators. Kenshin could not help but sigh in his heart. However, the disciples of Imperial Thunder Sect were not mediocre. Immediately, another 100 or so disciples immediately activated their magic tools. One by one, the magic tools flashing with lightning and fire rushed out. Not only did they force the flying swords back, but they also counterattacked the swordsmen. This back and forth test was like a stone thrown into a calm lake. Ripples were born from the place where the stone fell and quickly spread to the entire lake. The waves of battle also dragged all the cultivators and swordsmen into it. Rumble! Ka-cha-cha! There was the sound of thunder and the flash of swords. When the first scream came from the mouth of a cultivator or a swordsman, it was immediately followed by an endless stream of screams. Every scream was the harvest of a life. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, hundreds of cultivators and swordsmen had already fallen from the two armies. At this time, the cruelty of the battle was different from that of Quan Ji Shan. That was because Quan Ji Shan and Tu Hong had a premeditated plan to lure the swordsmen into a trap. Other than a simple defense to not arouse the swordsman's suspicion, he did not send most of the Sky Patrol City's disciples into the battle at all. Today, all the swordsmen were mobilized. All the cultivators did not hold back. They used their flying swords to fight against the magic tools without the slightest mercy. In Li Chun's hand was a thin sword that was like spring water. The jade-green sword light seemed to be able to subdue almost everything. His figure broke free from a flickering lightning net. With a slight wave of his hand, the jade-green light flashed out and pierced into the eyes of a tall, dark, and thin cultivator from the Imperial Thunder Sect several dozen feet away. There was a flash of brilliance in front of the cultivator's eyes. The defensive yellow talisman was immediately corroded by the spring water, creating a flaw smaller than a needle's eye. However, it was this flaw that allowed the sword light to penetrate and rush into the cultivator's right eye at lightning speed. With a scream, the cultivator naturally used his right hand to cover his right eye. However, he only had time to cover his right eye before the green light pierced through the back of his head. The cultivator did not shout another word and his figure fell into the dust. Humph! Li Chun snorted coldly. His figure suddenly sank and his two hands stretched out. Above the cultivator that he had just killed, there were two other Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. They had just joined forces to kill a swordsman. Just as they were about to take the swordsman's storage pouch, his two sword lights pierced towards them from below. Attack! These two disciples were also Foundation Establishment late-stage cultivators. When Li Chun's flying sword approached, the two of them had already sensed it. They turned around almost at the same time. One was a palm-sized butterfly, and the other was a lightning dart that was like a spear. Both of them flashed with lightning and struck Li Chun's flying sword. Sizzle! There was a burst of thunder. Li Chun's flying sword was surrounded by lightning. Moreover, the lightning spread along the direction of the flying sword and rushed towards Li Chun. The two of them sneered and simultaneously urged their magic tools to attack Li Chun. Go! Li Chun's figure abruptly made a turn, and a thin stream of water emerged from beneath his feet, carrying his figure as it rapidly rushed underground. Where do you think you're going? The two Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples shouted. At the same time, they urged their flying techniques to chase after him. However, when the two of them rushed out for about 4 zhang, the disciple who used the lightning dart suddenly became alert. The lightning dart in his hand suddenly flew to the side and directly pierced towards a swordsman who was fighting with a Mozong Mountain disciple about 2 zhang to the left. Pooh! The swordsman was simply caught off guard. The sword light around his body flashed rapidly, and was unable to block the lightning dart. The lightning dart pierced through his body. Looking at the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple, he used force in his hand and threw the swordsman's corpse to the ground. Then, he suddenly rushed into the air. Almost at the same time, the other disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect who was chasing after Li Chun suddenly paused. The defensive brilliance at his waist flashed rapidly, and then his entire body was cut in half. This disciple didn't even have the chance to scream before he died. Looking at the sky, an extremely dim sword light flashed. It was like a thin thread of sword light had shrunk into the hand of a Void Heaven Sword School's disciple. It was the other disciple, Spring Equinox. However, at this moment, a tremendous force erupted from Spring Breeze's body. Spring Equinox had just retracted his sword radiance, and had yet to stabilize his body. The force of the impact sent Spring Equinox flying. Spring Equinox wasn't the only one affected. Even the swordsmen and cultivators within 100 feet radius were sent flying in all directions by the force of the impact. Spring Equinox scanned with his divine sense and knew that a cultivator had detonated a magic treasure to take down the opponent with him. Unfortunately, the sword cultivator was extremely agile and had already dodged. Only his flying sword was slightly damaged, but Spring Equinox and the others were affected. Spring Equinox calmed down a little and was about to use his divine sense to scan elsewhere when he suddenly felt a chill from his back. He was so shocked that he didn't have time to use his divine sense. The sword light around him shone brightly, and he was about to rush up. His right hand shook behind him, and the flying sword that was as thin as a thread also rushed out. However, he was still too late. Seeing that he had just flown 3 feet away, before his speed reached its limit, a fist-sized blue lightning ball streaked across the sky and sank into his back like a meteor. Although the sword light of Spring Equinox's protection was surging with all its might, extending and contracting like the quills of a hedgehog, the lightning ball still easily penetrated it. With a loud bang, the ball of lightning exploded inside Spring Equinox's body. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. How could Spring Equinox still have a chance to live? Several 100 feet away, an Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple holding a ring-shaped magic treasure was dumbfounded as he watched all of this. He was controlling the magic treasure to send out a ball of lightning to attack a nearby swordsman. Who would have thought that after the swordsman barely dodged, the swordsman would quickly attack him? He was in a panic and didn't have time to control the ball of lightning with his divine sense. As a result, Spring Equinox was killed. -8. Chapter 2504. However, this Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple's good luck had come to an end. Just as he was dumbstruck looking at his battle achievement, his opponent waved her hand and a black earth pillar smashed horizontally towards his chest. This disciple came to his senses and hurriedly activated his magic treasure. A small lightning ball was born and rushed to the front of the earth pillar. With a loud boom, the earth pillar was blasted into pieces. But just as the smoke and dust were flying and the earth was scattering, an incomparably black sword light as thin as a hair rushed from the earth pillar to the front of this Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple. The Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple's magic power was obviously exhausted. His divine sense was careless and was penetrated by the sword light. The brilliance protecting his body flickered slightly and was annihilated. Following the sword light entering his chest, that disciple only let out a light groan and died. Strings of blood splattered and one life after another was reaped by the sickle. Seeing such a situation, Roissy looked at Guyu beside her and asked in a deep voice. Guyu, spring equinox, has already fallen. Many swordsmen have also fallen. You still don't plan to take action? Guyu's expression did not change as she shook her head slightly. This junior will not take action. In this junior's eyes, these lives are all innocent. They should not have fallen here. They should have roared in the 9 heavens and galloped freely between this heaven and earth. But for this so-called Tao cultivator great war, their originally free lives have no choice but to be tied up here. Sai, perhaps you are right. Roissy looked at her disciples falling one by one and felt helpless in her heart. She could only sigh and said, It's a pity that this sword cannot transcend like you. Since this sword is stationed in 7 Extremes mountain range, then I must ensure that I complete the orders of the Sword Region Master. Saying that, Roissy raised her head and took a deep breath. Sword light shot out from her body and her originally dark skin seemed to be plated with a layer of silver light at this moment. Guyu knew that Roissy was about to take action and hurriedly flew back several feet. She stood quietly and watched coldly. It was as if this war had nothing to do with her. Buzz buzz! The sword light on Roissy's body blossomed and continued to elongate. As the sword light flashed, the sound of the sword humming also reverberated. When the sword light was only 20 feet long, Roissy's entire body charged into the air. She drew an extremely beautiful arc in the air and charged towards Kenshin, who was several li away. The sword light was like lightning, streaking across the sky. Not only did the surrounding heaven and earth's spiritual chi rapidly gather, it even pierced through the air. A rumbling sound came from the sword light along with Roissy's flight. As Roissy's figure approached, a cloud-like sword light appeared from Roissy's body. Roissy's sword intent was actually a pure and flawless white cloud. Kenshin had long been paying attention to Roissy's actions. When he saw that her actions had caused such a huge commotion, he muttered in his heart. However, what else could he do now? Kenshin opened his hand and a 3-foot-long purple golden hammer flew out from his body. The head of the purple golden hammer was 1 foot long, and the runes on it were very deep. Electric light flowed between the runes, and the flickering purple light couldn't help but rush out of the purple golden hammer. It rushed into the air, and issued a crackling sound. The 2-feet-long hammer handle slightly rotated, and the world's spiritual energy was sucked in like a whale. Rise! Kenshin's white hair suddenly scattered in all directions as a powerful aura surged out. He lifted the purple golden hammer in his right hand and similarly flew up, charging towards Roissy with a speed that was not inferior to hers. Following Kenshin's flight, a hammer's shadow with lightning lingering around it slowly formed in front of the purple golden hammer. When the two collided, it was already 1 foot long. Boom! A loud sound rang out. It was definitely an earth-shattering movement. The purple golden hammer finally collided with the white cloud sword. The first round of collision between the two golden core realm swordsmen and cultivators created a huge sound wave in the air. Amidst the sound wave, the 1 foot long white cloud was struck by 70%. The purple golden hammer shadow of the same size was also shaved off by more than 80%. Looking at Kenshin and Roissy, the two's figures were even faster than when they flew over. They retreated like bullets and were only able to stabilize themselves after being knocked back 1,000 feet. The dozens of cultivators and swordsmen below them were also affected and lost their balance, falling into the air. Those who were lucky barely managed to stabilize themselves. Those who were unlucky had long been killed by the nearby enemies. Not only that, the white cloud was like a strand of black hair. Every strand of cloud was a ray of sword light. After rushing into the purple golden hammer, it immediately revealed a ferocious appearance and danced rapidly like a jellyfish with countless tentacles. The purple golden hammer wasn't any weaker than the white cloud sword. The purple golden hammer was originally a shadow made of lightning, but now it suddenly exploded. The lightning pierced into the white clouds like flying swords. Wherever the lightning went, the sword lights disappeared like they were melting water. Rua's eyes narrowed and she took in a breath of cold air. The sword essence around her body circulated rapidly, and the white cloud sword turned into a white ribbon, spiraling towards Kenshin. After the first round of probing, Kenshin had some confidence in his heart. Rua's attack was definitely not for show. He was indeed slightly inferior. However, Rua's was using the white cloud sword. The sword light was like silk and was extremely good for defense. But in a real fight, it did not seem to be compatible with a swordsman's one-hit kill. In this aspect, Kenshin's purple golden hammer had a slight advantage. In addition, the lightning of the purple gold hammer seemed to be the nemesis of the white cloud sword. Just one bolt of lightning was enough to annihilate several sword beams. In terms of magical treasures, Kenshin had the upper hand again. As the battle continued, Kenshin had the confidence to win. Seeing the white cloud sword coming towards him, Kenshin's face showed disdain. He thought to himself, "Female swordsmen are no different from female cultivators. They both do superficial things. Although this ribbon is beautiful, what's the use?" As he thought, he waved his purple golden hammer. "Attack!" Lightning flashed on the purple golden hammer. It split into several parts and hit the white cloud sword. In an instant, the ribbon was broken into several pieces. However, at the same time that the white cloud sword was broken into several pieces, Rua's sword art moved again. With a buzzing sound, the several pieces of the ribbon suddenly exploded, forming hundreds of flying swords that pierced towards Kenshin. The sound of the flying swords piercing through the air was extremely sharp. Even a golden core cultivator as strong as Kenshin's expression changed. At this moment, he finally understood the power of the white cloud sword. Separate, Kenshin did not dare to be negligent. With a wave of his purple golden hammer, he activated his transcendence energy. The purple golden hammer shone brightly and a huge shadow of the purple golden hammer emerged, enveloping Kenshin within. The hundreds of sword lights pierced into the shadow, but were all blocked by the lightning within the shadow. "Ha ha ha," Kenshin laughed. "Sword cultivators are only SOSO. Seeing this, Rua's eyes unconsciously narrowed. She seemed to have made a decision. After all, the thunder-controlling sex lightning elemental spells had always been the most feared by sword cultivators. Kenshin's purple golden hammer was even more powerful. Her white cloud sword was indeed no match for it. However, things still went beyond Kenshin's expectations. Although the hundreds of sword lights were blocked by the purple golden hammer's defense, they did not dissipate like before. Instead, after colliding with the lightning, they were reflected back. Following Rua's sword art, the sword lights repeatedly collided and pierced out. It was like a ball of sword light enveloping Kenshin's body. At the same time, this sword light also consumed the lightning. In a few breaths, the lightning shadow of the purple golden hammer began to dim. Could it be, this woman wants to compete with me in transcendence energy? Kenshin was slightly surprised. He understood very well why sword cultivators had an advantage in a fight with cultivators. It was because their attack power was strong. And cultivators could fight sword cultivators because their transcendence energy was generally stronger than sword cultivators. Rua's was competing with Kenshin in transcendence energy. He was afraid that she was using her weakness against his strength. It was absolutely impossible for Rua's to do such a thing. However, in the next moment, the sword lights became more and more dazzling. It lingered in the surrounding space for hundreds of feet. Not only was it impossible to look at, but the whistling spiritual energy of heaven and earth could cut anything in the space into pieces. This made Kenshin even more surprised. However, Kenshin also withdrew his original intention. He mobilized his gold core, and his transcendence energy methodically poured into the purple golden hammer. While stabilizing the defense, he would casually strike from time to time. And this seemingly casual strike would always create a gap of a few feet in the white cloud swords within hundreds of feet. The originally smooth sword lights were sluggish again. Just when Kenshin and Rua's battle seemed to have entered a stalemate, a cold divine sense swept over from the Seven Extremes ridge. That divine sense seemed to have no emotions, and it was as bone-chilling as a snow region. When it swept over Kenshin, it actually made Kenshin tremble slightly. At the same time, his transcendence energy was also slightly stagnant. Third grade illusory sword? Kenshin was shocked. He immediately understood Ruoxi's intention. She only needed to defend the formation and delay him. Once the third grade illusory swordsman arrived, how could he still have a way to survive? However, things were out of Kenshin's expectations. That cold divine sense only swept over him and hovered slightly. Then, it swept over the entire battlefield and left in disdain. This? Kenshin was stunned, but his heart was also beating fast. With such a fierce person overseeing the Seven Extremes Ridge, it would be difficult for him to take advantage of the tens of thousands of Imperial Thundersect's disciples. Left and right is to find out the actual situation. Kenshin's mind changed again. There is no need to pester her. Wait until this female swordsman is seriously injured. Please don't take her life. Just when Kenshin was tender like water, but the knot in his heart could not be dispelled. Suddenly, another powerful divine sense swept over from behind him. Gold core late stage, teacher? Kenshin sensed that divine sense, and it came from behind him. That familiar divine sense really made him want to cry tears of joy. However, what made Kenshin not know whether to laugh or cry was that this divine sense also swept over a group of people and even the entire battlefield. It swept over and swept over the other side of the Seven Extremes Ridge. It was as disdainful as the swordsman. Although this divine sense was disdainful, Kenshin, no, all the Imperial Thundersect's disciples on the battlefield, Missouri Sungshan's and Tongyi Sect's disciples were greatly shocked. They knew that it was not only them who were fighting here, but also their gold core teacher. -8. Chapter 2505. A late-stage golden elixir realm cultivator, in a situation where the two armies were evenly matched, definitely had the power to turn the tide of the battle. Kenshin was relieved, but Ruoxi's expression changed greatly. Seeing that Kenshin was a little distracted and the smile on his face, Ruoxi's eyes narrowed and the sword light around her body once again flourished. That dazzling sword light forced Kenshin to involuntarily close his eyes. When Kenshin's divine sense swept out, he turned pale with fright. How is this possible? You're only a first-grade illusory sword realm cultivator. How can you transform into a sword? Indeed, Ruoxi's figure had already vanished. A cluster of dense white clouds congealed into a flying sword appeared where Ruoxi was previously standing. The sword's splendor that was previously surging around Kenshin's body was now emitting a shrill cry. All the sword's splendor frantically converged. The flying swords of several nearby swordsmen were also uncontrollably sucked over. Not good! When Kenshin saw that Ruoxi actually had the secret of transforming into a sword, he was greatly alarmed. Almost without thinking, his figure abruptly rose. Taking advantage of the fact that Ruoxi's sword light had converged, he waved the purple golden hammer. Balls of lightning were activated as if they were not spiritual stones and smashed towards Ruoxi. He took advantage of the situation and wanted to escape towards the Seven Extremes Ridge. However, he was still a little late. The flying sword condensed from white clouds rapidly swelled and then rapidly shrank. When it had condensed to the size of an ordinary flying sword, it suddenly expanded. A white rainbow, like the sun, rushed towards the balls of lightning that Kenshin had conjured. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A series of loud noises enveloped the battlefield of tens of thousands of people. That white rainbow passed through all the balls of lightning at an incredible speed in the blink of an eye and directly pierced towards Kenshin's back. Fight! Kenshin's heart shrank. He immediately knew that the time to decide the outcome of the battle had arrived. His golden elixir rapidly rotated and all the vital energy rushed towards his meridians. His transcendence energy then poured into the purple golden hammer. Dang! Like the sound of a golden drum, the white rainbow struck the purple golden hammer, creating a 3-inch deep crack. Moreover, the white rainbow's momentum didn't decrease. but its direction was changed by the purple golden hammer. With a pu sound, the golden light around Kenshing's body suddenly brightened, and then it was extinguished. That white rainbow actually went under his armpit and passed through. See, Kenshing's natal magic treasure was damaged. His primordial spirit violently fluctuating. The white rainbow even broke through his golden elixir's defense, and severely injured his body. As blood spurted out, his body staggered as his body's injured. "Let's go!" Kenshing sucked in a breath of cold air. He watched as the white streak of light passed through his body and several other Imperial Thunder Sect disciples before slowly coming to a stop. He didn't dare to stay any longer. Enduring the pain, he activated his flying technique and fled to the other side of the Seven Extremes mountain range. Thousands of Imperial Thunder Sect, Mo Sang Mountain, and Tongyi Sect's disciples had already died. When they saw this, they also retreated while fighting, moving towards the other side of the Seven Extremes ridge. Moreover, that incomparably sharp white rainbow slowly stopped in midair. The sword's light gradually converged, revealing Ruoxi's red face. Ruoxi had forcefully activated her secret technique to transform into a sword, causing great damage to her body. Unfortunately, Kenshing's purple gold hammer was too powerful, and that lightning net was too arrogant. Ruoxi's attack, which she was originally very confident in, did not succeed, and could only heavily injure Kenshing. Looking at Kenshing stumbling and flying into the distance, Ruoxi waved her hand and sneered. "Chase!" Yes, the swordsmen who were originally chasing the cultivator also had high morale. Many 6th-grade sword leaders responded loudly and commanded the 10,000 swordsmen to chase after the cultivator. On the other side of the Seven Extremes ridge, the battle situation was different. The Washing Flower Sect's leader was a graceful female cultivator who had a technique to retain her beauty. Her name was Bright Moon. This Bright Moon Maiden's cultivation was at the peak of the early Gold Core stage. The magic treasure in her hand was also called Bright Moon. This Bright Moon emitted a pure white brilliance under the influence of the Bright Moon Lady's magic power. It lit up the sky within 1,000 feet. The brilliance was extremely cold, and it was compatible with the cold wind of the snowy highlands. Its power was multiplied. The white flying sword was a white lotus, similarly emitting a pure white sword's light. The battle between Bright Moon Maiden and Bright Moon Maiden was much more interesting than the battle between Kenshing and Ruoxi. However, the outcome of the battle was different. Just before the Seven Extremes ridge's cold divine sense swept over, Bright Moon Maiden's white lotus sword transformed into a white lotus. The lotus petals spiraled towards Bright Moon Maiden. The sword's light on the lotus petals was like lightning. Not only did it emit a dazzling brilliance, it even pierced the air with a zzz sound. Moreover, each lotus petal seemed to be faintly connected. As they flew, they moved with each other. Not only was the flight path more difficult to distinguish, even the flying speed gradually increased, far surpassing that of ordinary flying swords. The two had already fought for a long time. Bright Moon Maiden saw the power of the White Lotus sword and knew that Yunbai had already used her full strength. Thus, she took a deep breath and bit the tip of her tongue. With a pu sound, she spat out a mouthful of essence blood onto Bright Moon Maiden. Woo! With a sound like a lone wolf howling on a snowy night, Bright Moon Maiden suddenly turned into an oval shape and rapidly expanded above her head. Go! Bright Night Maiden immediately formed hand seals. The gold core in her body spun faster. True essence poured into her meridians. The magic power was like a tide rushing into Bright Moon Maiden. As the magic power poured into Bright Moon Maiden, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth also crazily poured in. Go! When Bright Moon Maiden formed hand seals, she pointed her finger and Bright Moon Maiden flew out from her head. Like a meteor chasing after the moon, it shot towards the White Lotus sword. Bright Moon Maiden flashed around Bright Moon Maiden. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth formed an extremely cold brilliance around Bright Moon Maiden. Kachacha! As Bright Moon flew, the ice shards in the air shattered and fell. In the blink of an eye, Bright Moon Maiden was already close to White Lotus petals. Although it was still a foot away, the lotus petals suddenly condensed. As the lotus petals condensed, there was a one sound of metal and stone. This sound was the sorrowful cry of the condensed sword light. It was trying its best to break free from the extreme coldness of the sword domain. But immediately after, with a series of kacha-kacha sounds, Bright Moon Maiden cut all the lotus petals apart. All the sword light was also split in half. Pung! With a loud sound, the magic weapon Full Moon finally hit the bottom of the lotus petal. On the body of the white lotus sword, the heart of the white lotus sword also suddenly produced a lotus-like sword light, heavily colliding with the full moon. The brilliance of the full moon was completely restrained, and the shock wave sent the magic weapon flying. Bright Moon Maiden's face was also flushed red. Clearly, her primordial spirit was somewhat damaged. Looking at White Lotus Sword, it was even worse. The magic treasure, Bright Moon, had not only destroyed Bai Lian's sword form, revealing the flying sword, but it had also sent the flying sword flying diagonally. Several deep cracks had appeared on the pure white sword's body. Pooh! White Lotus Sword was damaged, and Yunbai was also injured. She spat out a mouthful of blood and her face was pale. Humph! Sword cultivators are only SOSO! Bright Moon Maiden's eyebrows were raised, and she coldly spat out these words. Her handsome face was even more disdainful, and the redness on her face was even more beautiful in contrast to her pure white face. Yunbai originally wanted to leave a few sword scars on Bright Moon Maiden's face, but now she was even more embarrassed and angry. She gritted her teeth. Although she was seriously injured, she still forcibly controlled White Lotus Sword. The White Lotus Sword streaked across the air several tens of feet away, and very abruptly pierced towards the beautiful female cultivator in the distance in a fiery red robe. Wasn't that female cultivator Fairy Hong Xia? Fairy Hong Xia was originally fighting with a 4th-grade swordsman with a magic treasure in hand. That magic treasure had already wrapped around the swordsman's arm. Just as she was about to kill him, Yunbai's White Lotus Sword suddenly rushed over, frightening Fairy Hong Xia so much that she hurriedly retreated. She couldn't even protect her magic treasure. With a "C" sound, the White Lotus Sword slashed across Fairy Hong Xia's arm. It easily pierced through a flaw in her defense, and a deep bloody scar was left on Fairy Hong Xia's arm. Blood immediately gushed out, dyeing Fairy Hong Xia's pure white skin red, and even her fiery red Taoist robe was dyed red. Not only that, the White Lotus Sword did not stop after injuring Fairy Hong Xia. It rushed to the front of the swordsman whose arm was bound by the magic treasure, and suddenly spun, cutting Fairy Hong Xia's magic treasure into several pieces. Fairy Hong Xia's figure stopped in midair. She reached out her hand and swallowed a pill. Then, her almond-shaped eyes flashed with ruthlessness. She slapped her forehead, and with a "Jie," a phoenix cry, more than 10 feet in size flew out of her body. Oh! Seeing Fairy Hong Xia's ice phoenix celestial body appear, Yunbai was slightly taken aback. But soon after, she pointed her finger, and the White Lotus Sword turned into a stream of light and rushed into the air. Its target was Fairy Hong Xia's ice phoenix celestial body. Jie! The ice phoenix let out another long cry, and the sound shook the surroundings. At the same time, it flapped its 2 wings, and its entire body retreated slightly. The huge phoenix head retracted with all its might, and then suddenly stretched out again. A deep blue brilliance was spat out from the ice phoenix's mouth, and like water from the 9 heavens, it blocked the White Lotus Sword. The White Lotus Sword was hit by the deep blue brilliance, and the sword light immediately shrunk. It tried its best to fly forward, but as if it was stuck in a quagmire, it could not move forward at all. Scientian primordial water? Yunbai was shocked at first. Clearly, she was very surprised that a female cultivator in the late Foundation establishment stage would have Scientian primordial water. But later, when the Scientian primordial water seemed to be endless, her face was not only shocked, but shocked and frightened. Because not only did the Scientian primordial water trap her White Lotus Sword, it also quickly sealed her surroundings, as if it wanted to trap her. Oh no! I shouldn't have vented my anger on this female cultivator. Yunbai was filled with regret. She knew clearly that if she had not offended Fairy Hongxia, how could she have made her use her Ice Phoenix celestial body to challenge her, an illusory swordsman? And now, not to mention that she was heavily injured, even the White Lotus sword was trapped by the Xiantian primordial water. Yunbai might not be able to fight against Fairy Hongxia. Escape? Yunbai immediately had this thought. Then she tried her best to activate her sword energy. The White Lotus sword shone brightly and rushed into the Xiantian primordial water, wanting to fly back to Yunbai's hand. -8. Chapter 2506. At this moment, the cold spiritual will swept past where Kenxing was. It swept past Fairy Hongxia and the others and immediately locked onto Fairy Hongxia. Oh no! Fairy Hongxia sensed the strong spiritual will and was shocked. Her Ice Phoenix celestial body flapped its wings and flew up in an attempt to escape. Immediately after, the second spiritual will, which was equally strong, swept past where Kenxing was. Similarly, when the spiritual will swept past Fairy Hongxia and her arm, which had just stopped bleeding, it immediately stopped. A kind of extreme anger was born from the divine sense. Darling Xiao? Sensing the familiar spiritual will and the anger in it, Fairy Hongxia was stunned. Why did he come back to Seven Extremes Ridge? However, Xiaohua's spiritual will had already been concealed. If not for Fairy Hongxia's close observation, she would not have been able to detect it so easily. Just as Fairy Hongxia was deep in thought, a blue figure rapidly flew over from the direction of the Seven Extremes mountain range. Before the figure could get close, a powerful aura gradually spread throughout the entire battlefield. It was like the gentle breeze before the arrival of a tsunami. Fairy Hongxia was shocked when she saw Yunbai suddenly attacking Fairy Hongxia. However, her primordial spirit was also damaged, and she could not save her in time. She had just activated her magic treasure Bright Moon and saw Fairy Hongxia escape danger. Although she suffered a flesh wound, it was still better than dying. She heaved a sigh of relief. Immediately after, Fairy Hongxia released her Ice Phoenix celestial body. Fairy Hongxia was stunned. Ordinary cultivators only needed to release their celestial body, and their other powers would be restricted. They could not even use other spells. Fairy Hongxia releasing her celestial body against the illusory swordsman was indeed unwise. Of course, each person's Dharma body was different, and their supernatural powers were different as well. Some could increase their powers, while others had special supernatural powers. However, it was rare to see someone like Fairy Hongxia, who could control a magical treasure directly. When Fairy Hongxia's Ice Phoenix celestial body spat out innate primordial water, not only trapping Yunbai's White Lotus sword, but also trapping Yunbai, Fairy Hongxia's lips curled into a smile as she thought to herself. As expected of a fairy. Therefore, her magic treasure, Bright Moon, slowed down for a moment. She wanted to give Fairy Hongxia the credit for killing the illusory swordswoman. While she was hesitating, the blue-robed swordsman's divine sense swept over and his figure appeared. Attack! Lady Mingyu did not dare to be careless. She knew that as long as the blue-robed swordsman came to the battlefield, her side would definitely have no chance of winning. Moreover, Yunbai would definitely be able to escape from danger. Which fellow Taoist spirit sense is this? Similarly, when Lady Bright Moon shot out her magic weapon, Bright Moon, she also sensed Xiaohua's divine sense and was slightly surprised. However, even with Xiaohua's appearance, the best opportunity to kill Yunbai would be missed. She endured the damage to her origin spirit and circulated her true origin with all her might. The magic treasure once again took the shape of an oval and flew towards Yunbai. Scoundrel, how dare you! The blue-robed swordsman's divine sense did not leave the vicinity of Fairy Hongxia. When he saw Lady Bright Moon using her magic treasure, he could not help but be enraged. His divine sense left Fairy Hongxia and scanned the magic treasure, Bright Moon. Instantly, a strange feeling came from Lady Bright Moon's divine sense. It was as though she had lost her connection with the magic treasure. This? How is this possible? Lady Bright Moon turned pale with fright. This magic treasure, Bright Moon, was her natal magic treasure. If the blue-robed swordsman fought with her on the spot, and used his divine sense to sever the connection between her origin spirit and the magic treasure, she could understand. But at this moment, the blue-robed swordsman was still extremely far away. However, how could a strand of divine sense have such a divine sense? Even if he is a nascent soul master, it is impossible for him to have such a method, right? Lady Bright Moon's heart could not help but jump. Hong Xia! Hurry up and kill that guy! Lady Bright Moon tried her best to use her divine sense to fight with the blue-robed swordsman's divine sense in an attempt to regain control of the magic treasure. At the same time, she hurriedly ordered Fairy Hong Xia. Yes, this disciple understands. Fairy Hong Xia's face was also flushed red. It wasn't that she hadn't used her Ice Phoenix Dharma body, but she had tried to refine the tidal bead into her Ice Phoenix Dharma body after listening to Xiaohua's advice. Her Ice Phoenix physique was clearly stimulated by the evil tremor bloodline, and was completely different from Xiaohua's. Furthermore, it did not have any origin spirit fused into it. It was already pretty good that she was able to control the tidal bead to release the connate primordial water in such a short period of time. If she really wanted to use the connate primordial water to kill Yunbai, it would be a little too difficult. Seeing Fairy Hong Xia activate her Ice Phoenix physique and clumsily control the tidal bead to channel the connate primordial water towards Yunbai, Bright Moon sighed in her heart. She is too clever for her own good. If she had directly used her divine sense to control the magic treasure, wouldn't she have killed this ugly sword cultivator long ago? Yunbai, who was within the connate primordial water, was surrounded by sword light. She did not dare to release her divine sense too far, and was doing her best to resist the connate primordial water. Although the sword light was gradually being corroded by the connate primordial water, she was already overjoyed that she was not killed. Seeing the blue-robed swordsman's figure gradually becoming clearer, that extremely strange orange face was filled with anger. Even those reddish-yellow eyes that were different from ordinary people were about to spit fire. Fairy Hong Xia was also very anxious. With a "Jie" sound, her Ice Phoenix physique cried out again, and its two phoenix claws moved rapidly, as if it was really forming a seal. Instantly, the connate primordial water that had completely submerged Yunbai suddenly produced a several zhang tall wave, and slammed down on Yunbai's head. Rumble rumble, the sword light protecting Yunbai was instantly reduced by more than half. Yunbai's face turned pale again. This was because Fairy Hong Xia had already figured out that as long as she used the connate primordial water again, not only would the sword light around her be completely corroded by the connate primordial water, but her body would also be corroded by the connate primordial water until not even a single bone would be left. Senior Brother Ji, save me! At the critical moment of life and death, Yunbai could no longer care about the dignity of an illusory swordsman, and could not help but cry out for help. Mingyu tried her best to control the moon, but was unable to do anything. Furthermore, as the blue-robed swordsman flew closer, Mingyu's magic treasure Mingyu was getting more and more out of control. Mingyu was so anxious that she almost wanted to urge Fairy Hong Xia again, but she also understood that this matter could not be resolved by her urging. If she urged Fairy Hong Xia again, it would be a burden to her. Rather than that, she might as well keep her mouth shut. Indeed, Fairy Hong Xia waved her phoenix claws again, and a faint ripple of magic power was emitted. Heaven and earth's spiritual energy flocked together, and the connate primordial water was raised by her again. How dare you! At this moment, the blue-robed swordsman's cold snort could be heard. Mingyu's heart trembled, let alone Fairy Hong Xia. Her body trembled, and the waves that she had raised retreated. Quick! Mingyu's heart shrank, and she could not help but remind. Stay true to your heart, do not be disturbed by external sounds. Although that was what she said, it was still extremely difficult to do it. Fairy Hong Xia gritted her teeth, closed her eyes again, and the ice phoenix celestial body waved its claws again. Humph! The blue-robed swordsman's cold snort seemed to be much closer. Mingyu was shocked, and she raised her head to look. Ah! She could not help but cry out. She saw that the blue-robed swordsman had turned into a rainbow, and that blue rainbow swept across the sky, and shot towards her. This swordsman is at least a grade 3 illusory sword. Seeing that the swordsman could turn into a rainbow, Mingyu could not help but groan, and said anxiously, Hong Xia, quickly release that bitch, we will retreat now. Saying that, Mingyu leaped up, and without even caring about her magic treasure, she scanned the entire battlefield with her divine sense, and was about to give the order to retreat. Seeing that an illusory swordsman was about to die in her hands, Fairy Hong Xia could not help but bite her lips. She knew very well that if Yunbai had not been severely injured in the fight with Mingyu, she would not have had this opportunity, and there would not be such an excellent opportunity in this battle. Thinking about her own master, and what she wanted to do in this battle, this was an excellent excuse. Rumble! A thunderous sound came from behind Fairy Hong Xia and the others. This thunderous sound came from afar, and it pierced through the 9 heavens, as if a god's anger had descended upon the 7 extremes ridge. Xiao Lang is here! Fairy Hong Xia's heart relaxed, and the ice phoenix celestial body spread its wings, and its claws moved gracefully. This Yentian primordial water that could not be controlled previously was now as smooth as the feathers of the ice phoenix celestial body. Following Fairy Hong Xia's will, a huge wave of several feet high was set off, and it smashed towards Yunbai. Bitch, this sword will not let you off even if I become a ghost! Yunbai really lived up to her name. Seeing that the blue-robed swordsman was already in front of her, but the wave had already been set off, Yunbai's face turned pale, and her lips trembled as she spat out a few vicious words. Hua! The wave of water smashed down, and the countless tiny whirlpools within the Xientian primordial water instantly corroded Yunbai's sword light, and the half-foot-long white sword light disappeared, revealing Yunbai's body. Tremble! Within the rainbow, the blue-robed swordsman let out a furious roar. An extremely strong sealing force came from a mile away, completely suppressing the area within 100 feet of Fairy Hong Xia. The ferocious Xientian primordial water was completely frozen by this restrictive force. Even Fairy Hong Xia's ice phoenix celestial body could not move at all. The most dangerous thing was that the Xientian primordial water that was smashing towards Yunbai was less than half a foot away from her head. Yunbai's eyes were filled with extreme despair. As this powerful restrictive force came through the air, Fairy Hong Xia's magic treasure, Bright Moon, immediately loosened. She hurriedly controlled Bright Moon to turn around, but she knew that her magic power was not enough to break this restrictive force. She could only look at Fairy Hong Xia with pity, and with a slap of her hand, a crimson message talisman appeared in her hand. At this moment, a cold laugh rumbled like thunder. How majestic! How murderous! How powerful! Immediately, dark clouds rolled above Fairy Hong Xia's head, and hundreds of thick heavenly lightning bolts suddenly appeared. Kachacha, the heavenly lightning bolt struck down, and hit the restrictive force that had completely restrained Fairy Hong Xia and the Xientian primordial water. -8. Chapter 2507. Boom! With a huge tremor, the restrictive force was almost completely shattered by the heavenly thunder. Countless tiny threads of lightning flickered around Fairy Hong Xia. As the restrictive force was shattered, the innate primordial water annihilated Yunbai in a flash. Yunbai only had time to scream, and her eyes were dazed, as if her divine sense had been lost in the innate primordial water. Furthermore, the flesh and blood on her body quickly dissipated, and the exposed white bones were also quickly annihilated by the blue waves. Seeing this, Mingyu could not help but gasp. She had long heard of the ferocious reputation of the innate primordial water. Seeing it today, it really lived up to its name, and was even worse. Then, Mingyu quietly put away the message talisman in her hand. She raised her head and looked at the sky. A few miles away, there was still the rumbling of thunder, but in the sky, there was a small figure stepping on the sound of thunder, calmly rushing over. This is, which senior brother of the Imperial Thunder Sect? Mingyu's eyes lit up. She knew that this cultivator from afar was using the thunder escape technique of the Imperial Thunder Sect. The pure thunder control technique just now could only be used by the Imperial Thunder Sect's late Golden Core stage disciples, or even nascent Soul stage disciples. Looking at the blue-robed swordsman, who had flown half a mile to the battlefield and saw that his restrictive technique had been destroyed by Xiaohua's heavenly thunder and Yunbai had died, his figure also stopped in midair, coldly looking at the source of the sound of thunder. When Xiaohua came closer, a trace of disappointment flashed across Mingyu's eyes. She saw that Xiaohua was only the height of an ordinary person and was a little fat. The Imperial Thunder Sect's robe was bulging, and he looked very uncomfortable. Looking at his appearance, he was abnormally ordinary. If he was thrown into EG, no one would be able to recognize him. However, Mingyu did not dare to be negligent. She hurriedly went forward and saluted. Mingyu of the Huanhua sect greets senior brother of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, Go and command the battle. Leave this guy to me. Seeing that Xiaohua did not mention his name, Mingyu was even more disappointed. She could only whisper, Yes, Mingyu understands. At this moment, Fairy Hongxia had already broken free from the remaining shackles. She barely managed to grab the storage pouch that had not been corroded by the Xiantian primordial water, and retracted the Ice Phoenix celestial body into her body. An unprecedented sense of exhaustion emerged from within her body. I really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Fairy Hongxia smiled bitterly. What my dear Xiao can do, I may not be able to do. However, when she turned her head to look at Xiaohua, she was stunned again. Xiaohua! That's right, how could the current Xiaohua be her lover? However, when Fairy Hongxia saw Xiaohua's unintentional glance at her, she came to a realization. This is Sister Sky-Stealing Sun-Swapping secret technique. Back then, Big Sister could only barely change her appearance, but Xiao Lang could actually transform into such a person. Unfortunately, no matter how he changed his appearance, the look in his eyes could not be concealed. Hee. Thinking of this, Fairy Hongxia smiled sweetly. She reached out her hand again and took out an ordinary watertight magic treasure from her storage pouch. She raised it into the air and flew into another battle. However, Fairy Hongxia's action of killing Yunbai was too shocking. The swordsmen and cultivators around her had all seen it. Which swordsman would still fight with her? After killing a few swordsmen who could not escape, Fairy Hongxia took a deep breath and stood upright in midair. Bright Moon's opponent, Yunbai, had been killed by Fairy Hongxia. Fairy Hongxia couldn't use an ordinary swordsman to fight. She pointed her finger, and the transcendent artifact, Bright Moon, turned into a round disk and flew into the sky, covering her. She transmitted her voice softly. Hongxia, come over here! Yes, Martial Aunt Mingyu! Fairy Hongxia smiled at her martial aunt who had always taken care of her and obediently flew into the light of Mingyu. With this senior brother from the Imperial Thunder Sect, we have nothing to worry about in this battle. Mingyu whispered to Mingyu as she looked at Xiaohua who had come over with his hands behind his back. There was not a trace of magic power around him. Although Mingyu said so, the one who was worried about Xiaohua was Fairy Hongxia. Fairy Hongxia still looked unworriedly. She looked at Xiaohua who was standing quietly in the sky a few hundred feet away. In front of him, half a mile away, the blue-robed swordsman was also looking at Xiaohua coldly. This blue-robed swordsman was completely different from Xiaohua. Not only was his figure much taller, even his sturdiness was not something that Xiaohua could compare to. What was special was that the swordsman's face and head were squarish. Even his sturdy body was squarish. Furthermore, where Xiaohua stood, the cold wind blew, causing Xiaohua's Taoist robe to flutter. Although the golden light around Xiaohua's body was slightly overflowing, it was still slightly weaker than the blue-robed swordsman. This was because, within one zhang of the blue-robed swordsman, there was no sound of wind. Not even a corner of his blue robe was blown. It was as if it was a silent space. The two experts stood high in the sky. Even Mingyu was a few hundred feet away from them, not to mention the ordinary cultivators and swordsmen. They all stayed far away, giving them a few hundred feet of space. They were afraid that the battle between the two would affect them. Fairy Hongxia bit her lips and muttered in her heart. After all, Xiaohua's cultivation was only at the late foundation establishment stage. How could he face a third-grade illusory swordsman? Right at this moment, there was a small commotion in the distance. Oh! Mingyu frowned and used her divine sense to scan the area. She saw that the injured Kenxing was fleeing here, and the Imperial Thunder Sect disciple was fighting and retreating. She was stunned. Strange! The Imperial Thunder Sect's senior brother did not go to help the Imperial Thunder Sect disciple. Why did he come to the battlefield of my Rinsing Flower Sect? This question. Not to mention the 100,000 people in the Seven Extremes Ridge, even if all the cultivators in the Sky Patrol City were included, only the person beside Mingyu could answer it? Fairy Hongxia's heart was filled with unconcealable sweetness. Mingyu originally wanted to provide support to Kenxing. However, she saw that although Kenxing was seriously injured, there was no illusory swordsman chasing after him. Furthermore, the retreat of the Imperial Thunder Sect and the other two sects' disciples was orderly. It was not the kind of situation where an army would collapse like a mountain. Mingyu then sent out a few message talismans and ordered all the Huanhua sect's disciples to prepare to provide support. She then stood in midair with Fairy Hongxia and watched the fight between Xiaohua and the blue-robed swordsman. After all, as long as Xiaohua won, this battle would be more than half won. If Xiaohua lost, they could only escape. It was a pity that the two main characters of the battle were standing quietly in the air. Now, it had been the time to drink a cup of tea and they had no intention of fighting. Yes, how could they fight? How could Xiaohua fight with the blue-robed swordsman? No one knew what the blue-robed swordsman was thinking. Anyway, Xiaohua was very embarrassed at this moment. Although he had sacrificially refined the Kunlun mirror, that thing was too Hong's. There were tens of thousands of disciples in the field. If they were not careful, they would definitely reveal it. Could the Imperial Thunder Sect escape the investigation of the Shui region's spiritual master? Even if Xiaohua did not return to Sky Patrol City, he was afraid that it would be difficult to explain, right? Wishful staff? That was the thing that Xiaohua would be famous for in the future. Now that he had changed his appearance, it was even more impossible to take it out. In short, after thinking for a long time, Xiaohua really wanted to cry but had no tears. Forget it, I'll just stand here. Maybe I can scare this guy away. Xiaohua had the demeanor of a loud voice. However, the blue-robed swordsman was also shy. Obviously, the restrictive power of his hand was extremely powerful, but when it came close, it stopped. His red and yellow eyes stared at Xiaohua, but he did not make a move at all. This extremely strange scene did not change in the slightest until Kenxing staggered and flew to Mingyu's side. Seeing the Imperial Thunder Sect's Golden Core disciple standing in the air, Kenxing's eyes stared straight. Fellow Taoist Can? Mingyu inquired in a low voice. Which senior brother of your sect is this? Kenxing's eyes stared straight at Xiaohua's side. With a voice that even he himself felt embarrassed, he replied. This Ken does not know. This Ken does not seem to know this senior brother. Eh? Isn't he the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple in this great battle? Mingyu asked curiously. Looking at his Taoist robe, it seems so. Kenxing smiled bitterly. If it was an ordinary early-stage Golden Core disciple, this Ken might not recognize him. But this senior brother, just now, he seemed to have used the lightning evasion technique to control lightning. This, his cultivation, is at least late-stage Golden Core, right? How could this Ken not recognize this kind of nascent soul's senior brother in one step? However, this senior brother's cultivation, I'm afraid it's even higher than senior brother Qian Mo. How could he come to the Seven Extremes mountain range? If he's just passing by, Then why is he wearing the Taoist robe of a participating disciple? Moreover, this Qin was in a very dangerous situation just now. If not for risking my life, I almost died. How could senior brother come here? Qin had a stomach full of puzzlement, but this did not delay him from quickly taking a healing pill. With Mingyu by his side, with this Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple who was even more powerful than Qianmo, he would not worry about Ruoxi's damaged sword origin. When Qin was taking the pill, Mingyu explained the situation just now in a low voice. Qin was so shocked that the jade bottle almost fell. What? Directly controlling heavenly lightning? Damn it, this should be a nascent soul cultivator's divine ability, right? Which senior brother from the Heavenly Thunder Palace is this? Qin's brain juice was being racked. It's that powerful? Mingyu was also slightly stunned. She did not expect the difficulty of controlling heavenly lightning to be so high. And that's right. Qin suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and said in a low voice, "Our Imperial Thunder Sect's secret technique can only be used after reaching the nascent soul realm to communicate with the power of heaven and earth and control heavenly lightning. That's not right," Mingyu said curiously. "This concubine has personally seen Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples using magic treasures, such as flying swords, to guide heavenly lightning down. TCH, how can that be compared?" Qin curled his lips and said in a low voice, "That's because there's a lightning-attracting array inside the magic treasure. What's even more lazy is that the magic treasure contains lightning and can borrow a bit of heavenly lightning's power to use. Fellow Taoist Mingyu, didn't you see this senior brother of mine? He doesn't have any magic treasures or the like in his hands, but he's guiding lightning with his bare hands. This is a secret technique of my Imperial Thunder Sect that is not passed on. There are only a few people in the sect who can do it, hee." While speaking, Ruoxi also flew over. Behind her in the distance was formless sword Guyu. Ruoxi also looked at Xiaohua and the blue-robed swordsman in astonishment. She then scanned the entire battlefield but did not see any trace of Yunbai. When she found a sword cultivator to ask, her face revealed a miserable expression. At the same time, her furious gaze also fell on Mingyu. -8. Chapter 2508. However, it was clear that the only sword cultivators were the blue-robed swordsman and Ruoxi. As for the cultivators, there were 2 from the Imperial Thunder Sect and 1 from the Huanhua Sect. Ruoxi was definitely not a match for Mingyu and Qin. Ruoxi was very clear about the blue-robed swordsman's calmness. When she flew to the left and whispered a few words, the blue-robed swordsman didn't even frown, as if he didn't hear her. However, when Ruoxi retreated, the blue-robed swordsman asked in a deep voice, "I'm Ji of the Copper Bell Sect. Who are you from the Imperial Thunder Sect?" "I." "Nameless." Xiaohua saw that this swordsman was actually so calm and still wanted to ask for his name. He hesitated slightly before answering. "Nameless. Good name." Ji didn't care whether Xiaohua concealed his name or not. He nodded. "This Ji can fight with an expert from the Imperial Thunder Sect. This trip to the 7 Extremes Mountains was not in vain." "Please," Xiaohua's pupils shrank, and he raised his hand. "All right, since Brother Nameless won't fight, then this Ji won't be polite." Ji cupped his fists, and his body emitted a faint earthen yellow brilliance. His figure gradually accelerated as he flew towards Xiaohua. "Oh!" Xiaohua's magic power surged as he waved his hand. When he was about to take out a demonic tool, he saw the brilliance around Jiye's body and couldn't help but be stunned. This brilliance seems very familiar. Why is it similar to the cloud-suppressing seal? Copper Bell Sect? Xiaohua suddenly thought of Jiye's self-introduction, and his eyes flashed with a trace of understanding. This young master knows, this Ji is a tool cultivator. Ha ha ha, I understand, no wonder he didn't make the first move. It turns out, he doesn't have a magic weapon. He himself is a magic weapon. The corner of Xiaohua's mouth twitched. He finally understood why the two of them confronted each other for so long. However, he immediately felt a chill in his heart. He hadn't encountered many weapon cultivators in this battle, and the highest realm he had encountered was only at the drawing sword realm. However, this Ji actually had a cultivation of the 3rd grade of the illusory sword realm, and he had refined a magic treasure into his body. Xiaohua really lacked this kind of experience in direct combat with magic treasures. Looking at Jiye's body, the earthen yellow brilliance became increasingly brilliant, and a kind of valiant force involuntarily diffused throughout the entire battlefield. As for Xiaohua, who bore the brunt of this, he felt that the true essence in his body had already been obstructed, making it difficult for him to circulate it smoothly. Roar! Xiaohua raised his head and roared. The sound of thunder also came from his body. Rumble! Tiny threads of thunder surged out from his body. At the same time, his body suddenly rushed out. It was as if he was stepping on rolling thunder. Imperial Thunder Shock! Imperial Lightning Shock! It was Imperial Thunder Shock! It's not Imperial Lightning Travel! Kenshin was so excited that he couldn't control himself. Previously, he was already shocked by Xiaohua's lightning escape technique, but when he heard the loud sound of Xiaohua's Imperial Lightning Travel technique, he cried out involuntarily. I have finally seen Imperial Lightning Travel in my lifetime! Fellow Taoist can. Mingyu was rather astonished to see Kenshin lose his composure. She said in a low voice, This is Imperial Thunder Shock very difficult to cultivate? It's more than difficult! Kenshin blurted out, but after he finished speaking, he regretted it and said in a low voice, This is a secret of my Imperial Thunder sect. Forgive me for not being able to say it out loud. Nonsense, Master Qian Lazy had only cultivated to the edge of the 2nd layer of the lightning eclipse. He hadn't even stepped into Imperial Thunder Shock. This golden course senior brother was already at the 3rd stage of the lightning eclipse. Do you think Kenshin could casually reveal this? One wank. Ji Yi had already turned into a shooting star. The earthen yellow brilliance was exceptionally dazzling. The strength of the confinement force surrounding him was fluctuating. As he flew, all of the magic tools and magic treasures within 100 zhang of him, including flying swords, were vibrating. They were all not under the control of cultivators and swordsmen's divine senses. They slightly trembled in midair and emitted frightening cries. At this moment, Mingyu also understood. As an equipment cultivator, it was normal for Ji Yi to be able to use his divine sense to isolate her connection with her magic treasure Mingyu. Looking at Xiaohua again, his figure was also blurry. He was like a bolt of lightning. Even the might of wind and thunder surrounding his body was not the least bit inferior to Ji Ye's. Senior brother Nameless, what are you doing? Seeing Xiaohua also clenching his fists and rushing over, Kenshin was dumbstruck. A golden core cultivator was actually competing in physical strength with an equipment cultivator. Wasn't this just stupid? Both of them were using all of their strength. The distance of a few li was closed in an instant. Even Ji Yi was bewildered. He didn't know why Xiaohua still hadn't taken out his magic treasure at this time. His other hidden hand could only fall through in vain. But at this moment, Ji Yi suddenly felt a needle-like feeling in his Naiwen palace. Oh! Ji Yi laughed involuntarily. He clearly understood that this was definitely a divine ability that Xiaohua used with his divine sense. Unfortunately, he was currently an equipment cultivator. He simply didn't fear this kind of secret technique. Indeed, Xiaohua really couldn't think of any method. He flew to the center and used the soul-piercing technique. Who would have thought that Ji Ye's Naiwen palace was like a lump of stubborn stone? His divine sense was instead pierced. Fight! Ji Ye's scarlet-yellow eyes didn't even blink. He clenched his fists and smashed them towards the charging Xiaohua's body. Senior martial brother! Kenshin couldn't help but clench his fists. He clearly understood that if this fist smashed onto the body, not to mention a mid or late gold core cultivator, even a nascent soul cultivator absolutely wouldn't be able to withstand it. Since Kenshin was so anxious, there was no need to mention Fairy Hong Xia's worry. She really didn't understand why Xiaohua didn't take out his magic treasure. Could it be that he gave me his magic treasure, and didn't have it himself? This kind of lover. Good, today this old man wants to see if your equipment cultivator's body is stronger, or if my Imperial Thunder Sect's body cultivator is stronger. Xiao Hua's arrogant voice rose from afar. It really made everyone's eyes pop out. Xiao Hua actually also clenched his fist and smashed it towards Ji Ye's fist. Rumble! It was practically a world-shaking tremor. Waves of air soared into the sky from between the two people. Within several hundred zhang, all the magic tools, magic treasures, and flying swords lost control. They were sent flying by Ji Ye's uncontrollable confinement power, and the countless tiny lightning bolts that rose from Xiao Hua's body. The swordsmen and cultivators who were fighting turned pale with fright. This kind of power had already surpassed a fight between golden core cultivators. They couldn't help but connect to their magic treasures and immediately flew up again, leaving the several hundred zhang space for the two people who made them feel inconceivable. The cultivators and swordsmen who were fighting might not have seen clearly, but the cultivators and swordsmen who were secretly watching the fight were dumbstruck. They saw the two people colliding with each other with their bare hands. That Ji Ye's face was expressionless as he stood majestically. Even his blue robe didn't move in the slightest. But what about Xiao Hua? As if he was struck by a heavy blow, he was thrown into the air. However, Xiao Hua, who was accompanied by this flash of lightning, flew up 5 zhang and immediately laughed wildly. A string of afterimages flashed and rushed towards Ji Yi again. No matter if it was a cultivator or a swordsman, they were all very clear that Ji Yi was a high-level equipment cultivator of the illusory sword. It was a magic treasure. How could a cultivator compare? Not only did Xiao Hua receive Ji Yi's all-out attack, he even counterattacked vigorously after being repelled. This cultivator, good heavens, could he still be called a cultivator? The following battle situation was even more puzzling to the crowd. They saw Xiao Hua brandish his fist towards Ji Yi, and a rare trace of astonishment flashed through Ji Ye's eyes. He also brandished his fist to block. The two people actually fought in the air with their fists and feet. Although Ji Ye's fists and feet contained a strong confining power, and Xiao Hua's fists and feet flashed with lightning, and when their fists and feet hit a hard rock, the rock would certainly be turned into powder. However, each of their moves was clear, completely similar to the martial arts of the secular world. Among the several tens of thousands of cultivators and swordsmen, there were definitely people who had seen fists and feet. When they saw that the two seniors were actually martial artists, they became even more puzzled. After all, martial arts were the work of the secular world's people. After fighting for no less than half a cup of tea's time, the two people were actually evenly matched. Xiao Hua's Big Dipper God fist and ethereal steps were not inferior to Ji Ye's fists and feet in the slightest. Especially Xiao Hua's physical body. Even if it was inferior to Ji Ye's, the difference was limited. Moreover, within the space of several tens of zhang around the two people, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was incomparably chaotic. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth that was stirred up by the two people's every move was actually greater than the spiritual energy of heaven and earth when two magic treasures were fighting. Xiao Hua, a golden cord disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, had really overturned the limits of cultivators today. Looking at Ji Yi again, his originally almost emotionless red and yellow eyes now had a bit of fanaticism. It seemed that he hadn't been this happy for a very, very long time, and hadn't fought with such a wild style. "Eat my fist!" Ji Yi shouted loudly. He clenched his fist, and a power that could shatter a huge rock with a single punch, accompanied by an extremely valiant confining power, rushed towards Xiao Hua. "Ha ha ha, how could this old man be afraid of you?" Xiao Hua clasped his hands together, and lightning lingered on his fists. The lightning tore apart the confining power and rushed towards Ji Ye's fist. With a loud bang, the two fists collided. The air condensed, and then a wave of air gushed out. As the wave of air rolled, fine traces that were hard to see with the naked eye actually flashed in the air. However, these fine traces were too small, and as soon as they appeared, they immediately healed. This impact was still a bit too strong, and Xiao Hua couldn't be as steady as Ji Yi. His body twisted and turned, cleverly dispersing the force, and even using this force to counterattack Ge. This was also what Ge couldn't understand after much thought. Nameless, Ge blinked his eyes and said, "This old man didn't expect that a cultivator of the Imperial Thunder sect like you would also be proficient in the martial arts." Likewise, Xiao Hua casually replied. However, the martial arts of today's martial arts are already nothing in this old man's hands. Ge continued, "It's rare for this old man to meet an opponent like you. If I don't use my best skills, then this old man has underestimated you. I'll also let you down." And Xiao Hua still disagreed. However, if this old man uses his life cultivation method, even this old man won't be able to control it. Oh? Xiao Hua's brows furrowed slightly. Hearing Jie's words, he was actually treating him as a hypocritical opponent. "Do as you wish." Xiao Hua looked up and down at Jie and said, "Right now you and I are enemies. If you don't use your divine ability, this old man will take your life." "Good. Ha ha ha, well said. Since you and I are enemies, this old man won't say anything." Jie's eyes flashed with brilliance, and he laughed loudly. "To be able to fight an opponent like you, this old man will have no regrets even if I die." -8. Chapter 2509. As he spoke, the earthen yellow light around Jie's body suddenly shone brightly. A powerful suction force appeared from his body, strong tornadoes were created, and all the heaven and earth's spiritual energy within several hundred meters of him was drawn towards him. Xiao Hua stood steadily within the tornadoes. Purple lightning coiled around his body. He looked at Jie's transformation without fear. The light became brighter, piercing Xiao Hua's eyes to the point of squinting. However, he could still clearly see that the light was gradually expanding. Runes appeared on Jie's forehead, face, and bare arms. Those runes flowed within the light, as if there were countless tadpoles swimming within Jie's skin. Bzzz. Xiao Hua was familiar with the sound of vibrations coming from Jie's body. Along with the vibrations, Jie's head, shoulders, and arms gradually disappeared. They gradually turned into a solid earthen yellow color. When the surging heaven and earth's spiritual energy gradually calmed down, a 3-meter-long ancient bronze seal appeared in the air. Above the seal, there were many jade talismans hanging from it, and a lifelike dragon head was resting on top of the seal. The dragon's body coiled around the seal, and the runes that had been flowing on Jie's skin appeared with the sound of the dragon's body. An enormous power of a magic treasure flowed out from the runes, and under the dragon's body, there was actually a wave of runes. Overturning Sea Seal! Even though Xiao Hua had never seen the overturning sea seal before, he could not help but shout at this moment. Wasn't this the overturning sea seal that He Fang Yuan spoke of? It turned out that this overturning sea seal was indeed from Changbai sect, but it did not end up in the hands of ordinary Dao cultivators. It ended up in Huan country, and even more so in the hands of a weapon cultivator. No wonder Ji could suppress the innate true water. Xiao Hua had a flash of understanding. It was as if someone was controlling the ocean overturning seal. The ocean overturning seal slowly rose up, and a sealing force that was several times stronger than before suddenly appeared. The space within 1,000 feet was filled with this sealing force, and even the air couldn't flow. "Oh my, this is a true magic treasure!" Xiao Hua sighed inwardly, his hands swiping in the air. Amidst the dense dark clouds in the sky, a huge bolt of lightning struck down along with Xiao Hua's lightning-attracting art. It struck the ocean-overturning seal, the seal of the ocean-overturning seal. Terrifying Phoenix! Previously, Guyu had never seen Xiao Hua use the lightning-attracting technique, so she was unable to distinguish it. At this time, seeing this hand seal, her complexion changed greatly. It's just that Xiao Hua's previous cultivation and previous appearance were very different from the current one. Although Gu Yu's heart was greatly shocked, she still couldn't be sure. Actually, there was no lack of sword cultivators who had such thoughts, because the name of the terrifying phoenix was just too famous. Just like Qin Jian's reputation among cultivators. Of course, All sword cultivators knew that the Phoenix Dharma body, lightning attraction technique, and foundation establishment cultivation were the marks of the terrifying phoenix. At this time, Xiaohua only had the lightning attraction technique, so they could only think of Xiaohua as the terrifying phoenix's teacher. Roar! The ocean overturning seal emitted an earthen yellow brilliance that was almost 10 feet long. It rushed straight into the sky, blocking in front of the heavenly lightning. Even if the heavenly lightning completely scattered this brilliance, when it landed on the ocean overturning seal, the damage was minimal. Ha ha ha, sure enough, it's delightful! Xiaohua laughed heartily. His hands rubbed together again, and streaks of lightning poured down like a waterfall. See, not to mention Mingyu and Ruo Si, even Qinxing was also dumbstruck. Although he came from the Imperial Thunder Sect's Canlei Palace, when had he ever seen such heavenly lightning? When had he ever seen heavenly lightning falling like rain? That surging heavenly lightning, the powerful force, the flash that seemed to be able to scatter all living things, it really made people tremble with fear. The three of them had no doubt that if they were under the heavenly lightning, even if they could use magic treasures and flying swords to block it for a moment, they would still be smashed into pieces by the heavenly lightning. However, this was only their feeling. The ocean overturning seal was different. They saw the ocean overturning seal radiate brilliance in all directions. The dragon head that was entrenched on the seal slightly raised, and streaks of ripple-like illusory images rushed into the sky one after another, blocking the heavenly lightning 10 feet away. The most inconceivable thing was that the ocean overturning seal suddenly flew up, and an illusory image flew out, bringing all the ripple-like illusory images with it. The real body instantly rushed in front of Xiaohua, and crashed into him. Seeing that the true essence in his body was imprisoned by the ocean overturning seal, and it was very difficult for it to flow, Xiaohua's arms shook, and with a wave of his hand, he took out 2 huge devil hammers. These devil hammers were obviously smaller than the 2 devil hammers he got from the Thunder Sect, but now, it was already good to have something useful. Cha cha cha! Lightning flashed around Xiaohua's body. At the same time, he did his best to resist the imprisonment power, and at the same time, the 2 hammers fiercely smashed out. Boom! With a loud sound, Xiaohua's body flipped over like a bullet. The power of the 2 hammers could not compare to the ocean overturning seal, and Xiaohua was sent flying back. The ocean overturning seal did not stop, and once again flew out, following Xiaohua. It was much more agile than Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal. Boom! Seeing the ocean overturning seal coming over, Xiaohua stabilized his body, and at the same time, waved the 2 hammers again, and continuously hit the ocean overturning seal. Alas, rather than saying that he hit the ocean overturning seal, it was better to say that he was sent flying by the imprisonment power of the ocean overturning seal. Although the devil hammers were powerful, Xiaohua was not a devil realm devil after all. He could only borrow the weight of the devil tool, and could not use the devil tool. Every time he hit the ocean overturning seal, 50 to 60% of the power was blocked by the brilliance of the ocean overturning seal. The power that could truly damage the ocean overturning seal was really very little. Nameless. Are you looking down on this old man? Suddenly, a muffled and somewhat cold voice came from Xiaohua's ears. It was actually Jiye's sound transmission. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Looking at the ocean overturning seal that had stopped attacking and was slightly rotating in midair, he also sent a sound transmission. This old man has already used his full strength. How can you say that this old man is looking down on you? You are a cultivator of the Imperial Thunder Sect. If this old man was in his human form, it would be fine if he used your fists and legs barehanded. But why is it that when this old man transformed into a tool and fought with you, you are still barehanded? If you don't look down on this old man, then what is it? Isn't this old man's devil hammers a devil tool? Xiaohua laughed. Could it be that your Imperial Thunder Sect is so poor that you don't even have a single magic treasure? Jiye's voice became increasingly cold. Old man, you are a bit strange. Xiaohua pointed with his hand and said, If this old man took out a magic treasure, would you still be alive? You don't take the opportunity to kill this old man, and actually want this old man to take out a magic treasure? This Ji would rather fight to the death with you than be tolerated by you. Ji Yi was somewhat angry. Hearing Ji's words, Xiaohua's heart moved. He thought to himself, this tool cultivator has a rather straightforward temperament. If there wasn't a Dao cultivator battle, I should be able to make friends with him. If you still don't take out your magic treasure, this Ji will ignore you. Ji Yi sneered. There are tens of thousands of Dao sect disciples here, but there isn't anyone who can resist this Ji, right? All right, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and sent a sound transmission. This old man does have some methods, but it isn't convenient for me to use them in front of everyone. If you want to experience them, we will leave this place. All right. Ji Yi agreed without hesitation. The ocean overturning seal suddenly flew high into the sky, flying into the distance. You all will continue as before. Ignore I. Xiaohua coldly said to Kenshin and the others. If anyone dares to chase after me, this old man will take their life. Immediately after, Xiaohua's body surged with thunder as he chased after the ocean-overturning seal. Continue as before. Kenshin and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Continue the fierce battle as before? Before Xiaohua and Ji Yi arrived, tens of thousands of people had already died on the two battlefields. The ground was littered with broken limbs and blood. When the two experts appeared, although they were just confronting each other in the beginning, their intimidating aura had already affected the situation of the battle. Everyone's attacks were already somewhat sluggish. Of course, there were thousands of people who died in the process. When the two experts fought beautifully, how could the tens of thousands of people still have the mood to fight? Although they didn't clearly separate from each other, they only focused on protecting themselves and focused on the fight between the experts. At this moment, the two experts left and went to play on their own, leaving the tens of thousands of people as before, who would still have the mood to fight. Whether it was sword cultivators or Dao cultivators, their morale was completely gone. Forget it. Mingyu activated her magic treasure, Mingyu, and said to Ruoxi, You and I will withdraw our disciples and wait for the outcome of the two seniors. If senior brother of the Imperial Thunder Sect wins, all of you will withdraw from the Seven Extremes Ridge. Alright, if senior brother Ji Yi wins, all of you will also withdraw from the Sky Patrol City. Ruoxi gritted her teeth and replied. After saying that, Mingyu glanced at Kenshin. The three of them sent out their communication talismans at the same time. Following a sharp whistling sound, all the Dao cultivators and sword cultivators flew slowly and separated in an orderly manner. Don't touch the corpses of both sides' disciples for the time being. Wait until the outcome of the battle is determined. Kenshin shouted again. All right. Ruoxi understood that this order was obviously beneficial to her. Without hesitation, she passed down the order. Fairy Hongxia returned to her team. Guyu also flew to the left side of the beginning of spring. Everyone was eagerly waiting, looking at the direction where Xiaohua and Ji Yi disappeared. As for Xiaohua, while chasing Ji Yi, he released his Buddhist awareness. When he saw that both sides had stopped fighting, it was exactly as he expected. Only then did he change his direction and urged Imperial Thunder Travel to rush forward. After flying straight for more than 100 miles, it was an extremely flat land. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the rainbow in the sky was exceptionally dazzling. Buzz! The strong roar stopped in midair. The seal of overturn the sea stirred up the suction force again. Hurricanes swept up the snow and rushed into the air, raising the snow and dust within 100 feet of the surrounding. Can you show your true strength now? Jie's voice came. Of course. Xiaohua's Buddhist awareness swept through the nearby 100 miles. There was no trace of people at all. Feeling relieved, he clapped his hands and took out the wishful staff. Is it still a demonic tool? Ji Yi was somewhat dissatisfied. Don't worry, Xiaohua sneered. This young master has a lot of methods. You will be satisfied. -8. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.